pine wood box I end up in.
When it's my time, lay me 6 feet deep in God's country.
Yeah, I saw the light in the sunrise, sitting back in a 40 on the muddy riverside, getting baptized in holy water and shine with the dogs running. Saved by the sound of a pin-bound Dixie whistle in the wind that'll get you heaven bound. The devil went down to Georgia, but he didn't stick around. This is God's country. Yeah, I saw a light in a sunrise, sitting back in a 40 on the muddy riverside, getting baptized in holy water and shine with the dogs running. Saved by the sound of a pin-bound Dixie whistle in the wind that'll get you heaven bound. The devil went down to Georgia, but he didn't stick around. This is God's country. God's country.
Hey, y'all. Nice for y'all to stop by again. Oh, man. Oh, what's going on, y'all? Hopefully everyone's having a great day. Got a new streams, like, content thing doing tonight. So, yeah, just gonna try to do, like, something like this. Like, I'm trying to figure out the days, but kind of want to do stuff other stuff than Lorne. So I don't know, just something new. I was doing this before I took a break from streaming for a little bit, but so yeah, it seemed like it was getting some good feedback. So I'm gonna yeah. So who's all in here? SJB Dweller, Ellie. Hey, what's up, Dark? Ricky Spanish, Rachel D. Mark. And Salty Robot. Nice for y'all to stop by this evening. Anyways, so yeah. Let's get the night started. Got some gruesome stuff for us established today. Hence the background. So I'm trying to figure out which one I should kick off with. Because I have a lot in store today. Let's start with like I said, today is going to be one of those it's definitely going to be viewer discretion is advised for the day, for tonight. If you're not into this stuff, I'm just giving you a fair warning. This saying. Let's do. Yep, I'm gonna start the day off with a bang. Where was it? Ah, here it is. This is off of Final Afflictions channel. This video is called I don't know why I'm laughing. I need to stop. This is horrible. Family gets eaten by a pack of sharks after crashing into the water. The odds. I mean, I think that's why I'm well, should be on that one show on Spike from back in the day. Now they changed the station, the channel's name, but it's like called 1,000 Ways to Die. That would have been on it.
In this episode.
Oh yeah, shit. Where was it? Shit, there it is.
A car crashes through a safety barrier and dangles precariously on a cliff ledge. One of the passengers plummets into the sea below, only to be devoured by a
Great field version. Nice for you to stop by.
pack of 14 hungry sharks. Moments later, the car tumbles downwards. Will the remaining passengers meet the same ferocious end? Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is one of the most terrifying and unique shark attack stories you'll ever hear.
Sharks are literally one between sharks and crocodiles. Crocodilians. One of my most fascinated animals out there. Actually, that's why I was about to go into marine biology, was just to study sharks, because I love them so much.
Welcome to Final Affliction. It was 1960s.
Hey, fun fact about Falcor here. Sorry, before pausing. For pausing. Sorry. I adopted a great white like years ago because I love them.
7 in Sydney, Australia. Some friends
She actually lives in Australia.
were heading out for the day. They were a group of 3 adults and 1 child. They climbed into the car, chatting happily as they made their way along Australia's coastline. They drove through
They do. Orcas kill great whites just for their liver.
Sydney's picturesque eastern suburb of Dover Heights. The road wound along the cliff tops. On this particular day, however, the visibility was poor. The autumn fog had rolled in off the sea, enveloping the coast and the city in a blanket of white. As the car motored along, the child in the back seat began acting up. He had dropped something on the floor and couldn't reach it. In an attempt to
Goddamn kid.
calm the child down, the driver tried to reach into the footwell behind him and find the toy. He took his eyes off the road for a second. It was a second
The struggle. That's like one of those infomercials.
He took his
Right there.
eyes off the
That-
road for a second. It was a second
And then it went perfectly right down between the fucking armrest and the seat. Yeah. The second that your phone does that, it's game over. It's in the abyss.
that proved fatal. He misjudged his speed at the oncoming corner and veered to the other side of the road. He slammed on his brakes, but it was too late. The car crashed through the safety barrier. The passenger
Hey, outdoor loser. And no, outdoor loser. I am not a marine biologist, but I have studied like sharks for like over 20 years or so.
screamed.
Majority of my life, I've studied sharks.
As the car flew through the air for a few seconds before tumbling down the cliff. But it didn't topple into the sea, not straight away. It became caught on some rocks sticking out from the cliff edge.
Hey, JB, nice for y'all to stop by. Outdoor loser and JB, nice for you to stop by.
The rocks held the car in a terrifying vertical position. The sudden halt on the rocks sent everyone
That's horrible.
flying forwards in their seats. The front passenger hurtled forwards. She smashed through the windscreen and fell to the water 100 feet below. Only seconds later did she hit the cold, hard surface of the ocean. She lay still, lifeless on top of the water. Within moments, there were shadowy shapes making a beeline for the woman in the water.
I bet it was oceanic whitetip. Normally they do that. Fun fact, that was the shark for when the USS Indianapolis sunk. Yeah. Majority of our soldiers were eaten by oceanic whitetips because they're opportunistic and they love the open water. So anything that planes, boats, sinking, anything that happened that brings activity or something shining like in the water, because they're out in the open ocean. Like some of these are like by those shallower waters, some shark species. Like oceanic whitetips are more at the deep part ocean and always traveling, so they're very opportunistic. So they're very aggressive. When anything, like, especially for divers and stuff, you have to be on the lookout for those guys. Or yeah, if you happen to succumb from like a boat sinking or stuff like that, yeah, more than likely you're going to get investigated by oceanic whitetips. So
They converged from all
oh
directions
shit, I need
on
to
top of the water. Within moments, there were shadowy shapes making a beeline
dude, get out of the water!
for the woman in the water.
Fucking tiger shark. That's a tiger.
They converged from all
Those are bulls.
directions, drawn by the loud splash, drawn by the scent of blood. There was a frenzied attack on the woman's body. Eyewitnesses
Jesus.
reported seeing 14 sharks
Oh my god! 14 sharks.
thrashing around in the water as the car hung precariously on the cliff above. If the passenger hadn't died on impact, she was torn to shreds in seconds by the sharks below. The driver could see the commotion in the water. He could see the ocean bubble and boil, turning red as the woman
No, JB, these are not real footages. They're just happen to be like compilations of random videos.
disappeared from sight. He cried out and tried to look behind him to see if the others were alive in the back of the car. The seatbelt bit into his chest. He couldn't loosen it. He couldn't free himself.
Yeah,
It
'cause
was
it's
holding
locked.
him firm, but he needed some slack in order to move. He heard the car creak and groan under the strain. Every time he made the slightest movement,
No one
the
move
car
off.
rocked and swayed.
Yeah,
It
just hit the unlock button.
was hanging on by inches. When the driver glanced over his shoulder, he could see the child and the other passenger were not moving. He tried to reach them, desperately trying to wake them, but they didn't respond. He didn't know what to do. If he
Fuck. That's. Oh my god. Oh my god. That's a. Oh my god.
somehow managed
Oh my god. My anxiety's through the roof.
to climb out of the car, he was still stuck on a sheer cliff 100 feet above the sea. People rushed to the cliff top. As the car hung there, emergency services were called. The man had hit his
Yeah, bull sharks are fucking dangerous as shit, Mark. They like the freshwater too.
head badly on the steering wheel. His
Highest testosterone level of any animal is the bull shark. They're like the fucking. Their pectoral fins are like. Oh man, they're like squared in, like all bullied in, like they're fucking ready to go. Like they could snap at any moment.
vision was blurry and his head was oozing blood. He could feel it throbbing. The pounding of his heart
Oh my God.
sounded in his ears. Terror gripped him as he prayed for a miracle. But after 30 minutes, clinging onto the edge of the cliff, the rocks finally gave way. The car
Jesus.
and the driver were sent flying. The car crashed downwards, somersaulting down the cliff. It smashed into the water below and bobbed there for a few minutes. The man felt the rush of water entering the vehicle. He desperately pulled at his seatbelt, but it wouldn't unclip. As the
Of course
water
not. Oh, of course not.
kept rising, he panicked more and more. He felt it creep up over his feet and onto his lap. He was now sitting in waist-high water.
Fuck.
Then something swept past his side.
Oh, God damn it. Why do they have to use. Oh, my God. I forgot the species.
Just outside
Looks like a 6 gill. One of the deeper water sharks.
the window.
And
A
green one.
dark gray fin sliced through the water. Then another, and
Oh. Oh, God.
another. The man was surrounded.
6
The
gill.
sharks had gotten a taste for human flesh, and they were hungry for more.
He's like,
Frantically, The man tugged at the seatbelt. Eventually, he was able to ease the tension and unclip it. The car was now half submerged. There was no way out except to dive under the water and swim out through the half-smashed windscreen.
That was not a Greenland. That wasn't a Greenland. That was a 6 scale.
But
6 or 7 gil, but I think it was a 6.
he knew what was down
Oh, look at
there.
that great white.
The thought shook him to his core. He knew the second he exited the car, he would
This guy gets bit in the calf. Fun fact. This guy right here gets bit by one of these bull sharks in the calf, and it literally bit his calf off, basically.
likely be devoured. He heard thrashing and splashing around him. He wheeled around. The sharks were trying to get through the smashed back windows.
Oh my god. Oh my god, that's going to send them into a they're already in a frenzy already because of the blood.
They were trying to get to the two passengers in the back
Yup.
seats. He had to get out of there. He had to act fast. He took one deep breath near the roof of the car and dived underwater. The blurry, shadowy figures of the sharks came into view as they swam past the open windscreen. He watched as they swam from left to right and back again, circling the vehicle, looking for a way in.
That 6 kill every time. That gets me. It has like that human eyes.
When he could see no sharks in front of him, he chose this moment to go for it. He
What?
pushed off the driver's seat with his feet and swam through the smashed
Those are huge.
windscreen. The blood from the gaping wound on his head flowed into the water.
Well,
The scent enticed the sharks. They homed in on the injured prey.
Yup.
When he surfaced, he scrambled onto the roof of the car. It was barely above water now.
Oh,
It
God.
was wet and slippery, but he clung on,
He's trying.
hauling himself
give
onto
it
the
to this
steel
guy.
top.
I give it to this husband right here. I give it to him. He's trying.
He steadied himself there for a moment, breathing heavily. Blood dripped into his eyes. He wiped it away and looked at the shore. It was tantalizingly close. All around him, dorsal fins broke through the surface of the water. They were having a feeding frenzy. They had found their
Told
way
ya.
into the car now and had made their way into the back seats. As the car gurgled and rocked and the tail fins of the sharks thrashed and splashed, the man knew he had to make a break for it. In just seconds, he knew the car would be at the bottom of the harbor and he would be eaten. Summoning all the courage he could muster, he dived from the roof of the car towards the shoreline. It was only feet away. He knew the sharks would be on him instantly. He hurtled through the water, kicking his legs
I don't know about y'all, but my anxiety right now is through the roof.
frantically, pulling himself through the water with his arms, inching closer
Picture myself in this guy's scenario right now.
and closer to the shore. It felt like an eternity. His
Jesus.
lungs felt like they were going to burst. His
Oh my
muscles burned.
God
He
damn.
was convinced with every second that passed that he would be attacked. He
Yeah.
was sure he would suddenly feel a sharp bite as one of the sharks grabbed him and shook him around
shit!
briefly. But miraculously, he made it to shore. He grabbed hold of the rocks and scrambled onto
Well, that video, there was someone that got bit by a great white.
dry land. When he made it, he looked around just in time to see the car sink. The swirling and the bubbling of the water was all that was left as it swallowed the car. The thrashing and splashing of the sharks continued for some time as they followed the car downwards. When emergency services reached the man, he was taken to hospital. He had a serious head and neck injury and was also treated for shock. But luckily,
Yeah.
he went on to make a full recovery. He lost his
I bet hit. Oh my god, I can only imagine his PTSD. Oh, I bet it's.
Friends that day in a tragic and terrifying event that would haunt him for the rest of his days. There had been a lot of reported shark attacks in Sydney Harbor and its surrounding beaches over the decades. The exact species of shark involved was never identified and remains unknown, although marine biologists theorize that this might be the work of the bull shark since they occasionally hunt in groups called schools. What we must remember is that the moment we step into the water, we are in their domain, not ours, and at any moment we might just meet our untimely, final affliction.
Woo! Actually, now. Give me a second. Actually, I think this was part. Ah, shit. I think this was part of. Yeah, this one is part of my videos. Got set up.
In
This lady, this. Oh, god damn! Get it.
this episode, wildlife biologist Patricia Wyman lands her dream job. After only a few days in this role, she enters the wolf enclosure.
Why?
Alone. Moments later, she is encircled by a pack of captive wolves.
Look at. Oh man!
And with that,
My god, wolves are fucking awesome, but good god, are they vicious.
her fate is sealed. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying story of Patricia Wyman and her horrifying last minutes before being killed by a pack of wolves.
No. Tiger sharks are the trash can of the sea. They'll eat anything that they can get their mouths in.
Welcome to Final Affliction. 24-year-old Patricia Wyman thought she had landed her dream job. She had
No, they're pretty aggressive, tiger sharks.
applied to work at Halliburton Forest and Nature Reserve in Ontario, Canada. The position was
Nothing like the bull shark, though. Not like nothing like the bull shark. Great whites are highly aggressive too. So
for a caretaker of the North American gray wolves. When she was accepted and welcomed onto the team, she was delighted. She had always been fascinated with the species and working with
no, nurse sharks are the ones that yeah. Nurse sharks are chill as hell. Nurse sharks, and there's the black tip reef shark. They're pretty chill too. And white tip reef sharks are also pretty chill too. Not the oceanic white tip. Stay away from those.
them was going to be exhilarating. Halliburton Forest covers 100,000 acres and comprises millions of trees and more than 100 lakes. It offers members of the public ecotourism experiences in an incredible piece of Canada's wilderness. It is a sustainably managed forest which includes a research facility.
Oh my god, that's a cool. That's a badass wolf in the background right there. I was thinking, oh my god, why does this guy? At first, I was like, I didn't realize there was glass behind there until when I saw the wolf walking by. I was like, why does this guy have his back towards this wolf right now? But I was like, thank God, there's a glass between him and the wolf.
Facility and education center. With the
Had a fucking retard moment right there.
aim to educate people about wolves, they built a wolf center and introduced their first wolf pack in 1993. They have always tried to keep the wolves as wild as possible, allowing them to exhibit semi-natural behavior. There is no human interaction with the wolves, and visitors can only view them through the one-way glass. The only time they see human beings is at feeding time. Patricia had recently completed her undergraduate degree in wildlife biology in the University of Guelph in Ontario. When she arrived for her induction, her supervisor warned her of the dangers of working with wolves. They had been in captivity for their entire lives, but they were not socialized with humans. That's the way
That's the problem. I mean, regardless, they're wolves, so they're, well, never mind, yeah. Well, in a sanctuary, you would think that they would be somewhat human socialized, but that's kind of nerve wracking that they haven't been. I mean, they get it, I guess, the more natural. Yeah, never mind. I need to shut the fuck up. I have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about.
Reserve wanted it to be. The wolves were
Okay.
free to roam their 15-acre enclosure.
Oh,
When the
okay. That
caretaker
makes
took
sense.
them their food, the wolves would hide away. They were timid and shy, just like wolves are in the wild.
Yeah.
They kept their distance from humans and had never
Yeah,
given
damn.
the staff any reason to be overly concerned. Patricia was introduced to her work routine, which included educating the public, giving talks, and caring for the wolf pack. She was taken into the wolf enclosure and shown where to feed them. The following day, she was
Why would you
tasked
be
with
on your
feeding them
knees
alone. As
in front of
Patricia
wolves?
unlocked the gate and stepped inside, she felt an uneasy feeling wash over her. She looked around, but couldn't see any of the wolves.
That's your human instinct or your natural instinct telling you there is something off. They get the fuck out.
She walked purposefully, looked around, but couldn't see any.
Oh, shit.
As Patricia unlocked the gate and stepped inside, she felt an uneasy feeling wash over her. She looked around, but couldn't see any of the wolves. She walked purposefully to spot where she dumped the food. She set it down, but when she turned to leave, she noticed the alpha male watching her. The way he was standing sent alarm bells ringing. The hairs on the back of Patricia's neck stood on end. He wasn't timid like the rest of them. He was eyeing up this new...
Look at that. Look at that. I bet that wolf right here, that's on video right here, 200 pounds. Close to it. Thing is huge. Or I would say close to 200 pounds right here. Or is 200 plus.
member of staff.
Look at the size of that fucking wolf. Look at the paws.
He was
Those are huge.
sizing her up. His manner was odd,
Man, that's a fucking alpha wolf right there.
and something about him unsettled Patricia. When she returned home that evening, she recalled her day's events to her fiancé. She was excited about her new role, but also mentioned her apprehension when it came to the alpha male in the pack. Although Patricia had clearly been unsettled by this...
Wait, Ellie, time out here. You're telling me someone... No, wait, wildlife classes... Oh my god. They handle the wild... Do they have a death wish? Literally. You don't fuck with... Oh my god.
particular wolf,
Yeah, this is like a wolf sanctuary, like up in Canada somewhere, from what I'm understanding. Oh my god.
she didn't share her concerns with her supervisor. Being new, perhaps she didn't want to cause a fuss. Maybe she was wrong about him anyway. The staff at the center had never raised any concern about him before.
Oh my god.
But Patricia's instincts...
Don't tell me she does something stupid. Please don't do something stupid, Patricia. Patricia! Whatever you do, please don't...
were right. There was something about the wolf's behavior that was worrying.
Whoa,
Something
shit!
had triggered a behavior change in him. And with her expert knowledge and understanding of wolf behavior, Patricia had noticed it. The following day, on April 18th, 1996, Patricia entered the enclosure once more. This time, she wasn't there to feed the wolves. The wolves were only fed once every 5 days. In fact, no one knows why Patricia went into the enclosure on her own that day.
Yeah!
And no one knows exactly what happened next, but Chief Investigator Eric Klinghammer came to the following conclusion. Patricia unlocked the gate to the wolf paddock. The metal framework clanged behind her, alerting the wolves to her presence. For some reason, she wanted to see them in their enclosure, but they weren't close enough to the fence. The paddock was littered with fallen trees. They lay scattered across the grass. Patricia stepped over them as she searched for the wolf pack. She had only walked through the enclosure a little distance before she came across them, 5 large adults lying down in the grass. They were already looking in Patricia's direction. They had already heard her. They had already smelt her. When they saw Patricia approach, they
I guarantee they already smelt her before she even got into the fucking enclosure.
stood up and pricked their ears. Patricia stood still.
Oh my
She
God.
didn't know whether to
Yep, she did something stupid. I was trying.
stand and face them or retreat slowly. She had been told that they normally flee when they see a person in their territory.
No.
They were normally hesitant, but not today. As Patricia stood there, frozen to the spot, the wolves walked forwards. They started to
God.
surround her, circling her.
Oh, God.
Patricia was trapped. She must have felt fear. She must have panicked when she saw them advancing. Her adrenaline
Oh, I guarantee she ran.
would have surged as the telltale signs of an imminent attack grew. Her heart thundered in her chest. The wolves stepped forward once more, their eyes locked onto the young woman. The alpha male approached. Patricia stepped backwards. As she did so, she tripped over a fallen tree and
God damn it. Yep, this is what caused it. She tripped. There they go.
fell to the ground.
Here they
That
go.
was
Here they
all
go.
it took.
Yep.
One single trip, and the wolves seized the opportunity to attack. In a second, Patricia felt the weight of one of the wolves on top of her as she scrabbled about on the ground. She knew she was in big trouble. She knew this was it. She tried desperately to get up, but the wolf was joined by more.
God damn.
In a frenzied attack, the pack bit her all over, clamping their jaws around her legs and arms. Pulling her limbs in all directions, she felt the tearing of skin and muscle.
Oh, man, I can only imagine.
She put up a brave fight, trying to lash out and fight
Yeah, I mean,
them off.
I need to shut the fuck up. I need to stop bashing her.
But there were too many of them, each weighing up to 175 pounds or 80 kilograms.
Yeah, grizzly bear even has a hard time with these. If you have a good sized pack of wolves, yeah, grizzly bears usually have a hard time with them.
They were strong and powerful. Their sharp teeth and jaws, designed to subdue and kill their prey, can crush bone. Patricia
Jesus.
felt herself grow weaker. As she lay there, she tried to cover her neck and head.
Hey, one of those weirdos in Maxwell English. Nice for y'all to stop by. Sorry if I miss anyone. I'm kind of like zoned in right now.
She had no more fight left in her. She was bleeding heavily. Patricia died that day. It was only her 4th day in her dream job. Her years of study had built up to a job like this, and it ended so brutally and tragically. To their shock and horror, 2 employees of the reserve found Patricia's body that afternoon. They immediately phoned the Ontario Provincial Police, who rushed over. 2 officers drew their weapons and entered the enclosure. As they made their way over to Patricia's body, they saw the wolves standing guard. But they hadn't eaten her. A few bites.
Wow. So they killed the shit out of her and didn't even eat her. So they just murdered her.
Wolves standing guard. As they made their way over to Patricia's body, they saw the wolves standing guard. But they hadn't eaten her. A few bites had
They literally just killed her. And yeah. Just for fun, probably.
been taken from her extremities.
They're like, probably like, oh, she looks easy. Let's do it.
But her torso was largely untouched. The savage attack had ripped the
Huh.
clothes from her, and multiple bite marks suggested at least 5 wolves had piled in on the attack. Maybe more. As the officers stepped
Fuck.
closer, one wolf lowered its head, fixed its eyes on them,
Here they go.
and let out a deep, menacing growl.
Probably the alpha.
This behavior was a sign that it was protecting its kill. The officers then noticed
Oh, they're going to eat it for later.
another wolf
Eat her later.
step forward and then kill. The officers then noticed another wolf step forward and then another. Gradually, the 2 policemen were being circled by wolves. They were surrounded
Hopefully they fire on these guys.
just as the wolves had done with Patricia. Outnumbered and not sure of the wolves' intentions, the officers fired a couple of warning shots in the air. The loud bangs shocked the wolves and sent them running. The 2 officers fled the
Okay, that's what I thought.
enclosure and called for backup. When more officers arrived at the center, 6 entered the paddock to retrieve Patricia's body. They did so without further incident.
Yeah, I would have come back with a shotgun or AR.
The investigator, Eric Klinghammer, suggested that the reason the wolves had not eaten Patricia was because they tend to avoid unfamiliar food. His conclusions of what happened on that fateful day came from over 25
you.
years of experience studying
this
and
for fun.
working with wolves. He also had extensive knowledge of wolf behavior and attacks on humans by both wild and captive canines. It was tragic that such a young and enthusiastic woman lost her life doing what she loved.
She got 2. It was that one day that, oh my God, if you knew you had that feeling, oh my God. You just don't. I'm sorry, Patricia. I shouldn't be bashing you like this. It's just,
We
one of those things that could have been avoided. It's just frustrating that this could have been avoided. It's really the reason why I'm so bent out of shape right now.
will never know why she entered the wolf enclosure that day. Maybe she innocently wanted to observe their behavior close up. But where there are predators, there are always dangers, and this time it
I know. I was getting the same feeling too. I was like, all right, she's going to make it, and then nope. That's why I like this channel too, because it gives you that sense of, all right, he or she's gonna make it, then nope. Oh my God, I am such a sociopath. I need to stop. Majestic. Oh yeah. I'm gonna change it up for a second. We're gonna do a little bit of run-ins with some serial killers. A plot twist. They keep you on your toes. That's why. Huh. Hold on. Give me a second, guys. I'm sorry. I'm trying to. Don't tell me my internet froze. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry, guys. Give me a second. Okay. I'm gonna choose. Here's a World War II story I'm about to play. It was when the Germans were trying to take this one castle in Russia, and the Russian soldiers defended the hell out of it. And the Germans used, or it might have been during World War One at the time. It's a World War One or World War Two story. I think. Anyways, I think it's two. if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's 2. Yeah, the Russians defended the hell out of this one castle when the Germans were like gassing the hell out of them. And yeah, you'll see. Here we go.
If there is one war story.
Here we go. This is off of Mr. Ballin channel. So, oh yeah. It's called The Real Story of the Undead Army. Buddy, nice for you to stop by.
Story that everybody needs to hear at least once. It is the crazy story of how this small group of Russian soldiers during World War I defended Auschwitz Fortress
Okay, it's World War One. It's Auschwitz Fortress.
in Poland. It is both absolutely horrific.
Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't in Russia. It's in Poland. I know nothing. I'm sorry for misleading you guys. I literally saw this video not too long ago, and oh my god, I am so sorry, guys.
And utterly inspiring. And I guarantee you, it's nothing.
And this is I'm sorry for pausing again, but this is a fucking badass fucking story.
Like any other war story you've ever heard. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange
It's a great motive, like Last Stand type like stories. It's
dark and mysterious, delivered in
fucking badass.
story format,
I'm gonna shut the fuck up and let Mr. Ballin tell it.
then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the Like Button's house, take all their fresh eggs out of the fridge, hard boil them, and then put them back. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Yes.
On the morning of August 3rd, 1915, during World War I, a 21-year-old Russian soldier named Vladimir Kotlinski looked out from behind the huge stone walls of Auschwitz Fortress in Poland. Out in front of him, he saw the same landscape he had been looking at for the last 6 months that he had been stationed at this fortress. It was a big, swampy forest that surrounded them on all sides. Additionally, in this swampy forest around them on all sides were dozens and dozens of trenches. Trenches are long, deep pits that soldiers will dig to both hide inside of when they're being attacked, and then also to launch their own attacks out of from behind their dirt walls. And these trenches that zigged and zagged all around Auschwitz Fortress were created by and now occupied by 7,000 German soldiers. And during World War I, the Russians were fighting the Germans. The Germans really wanted to take Auschwitz Fortress from the Russians. It was in a great strategic position with a railway passing right through it. There was also a river nearby and a main road, meaning whoever owned this fortress was greatly aided in moving critical wartime supplies and troops in a very hotly contested area. But despite the repeated attempts by these 7,000 Germans to take over Auschwitz Fortress over the past 6 months, they had all been repelled.
Yeah, the Russians, oh my god, they fought the hell out of them. Out of the Germans.
By Vladimir and the puny 900-man Russian force inside of the fortress. And so, by that morning, August 3rd, 1915, as Vladimir is looking out from the battlements over the trenches in the marsh down below, it was like both the Russians and the Germans had reached a sort of stalemate, where neither side was trying to attack the other, and neither side was leaving. They were just kind of staying put and doing nothing. In fact, over the last few weeks, there had been so little action from either side that the Russian soldiers inside the fortress got so bored, they began sneaking out the side door of the fortress to try to catch fish with their bare hands in the nearby river. But this morning, as Vladimir stood atop the wall, he noticed something strange happening in one of the trenches that was located closest to the fortress. It was still several hundred feet away, but he could see clearly down into this trench. And what he saw was...
Oh, so they're estimating approximately 400 feet away.
There was this cluster of high-ranking German officers that were kind of huddled together, and they kept looking down at the ground at something inside of the trench that Vladimir couldn't see, and then they would look up at the sky and kind of wave their hands around, and then they'd look back down at the ground below them. Now, Vladimir had no idea what they were doing. I mean, again, he could not see what they were looking at in the trench, and when he looked up into the sky where they seemed to be looking, it just looked like a regular blue sky. But whatever they were doing, it was making Vladimir feel nervous. Vladimir was a young junior officer, which meant he was in charge of other soldiers, but because he was so new, he lacked experience and credibility, and so really wasn't considered a serious leader within the army. And so Vladimir, as he's watching this strange behavior, was concerned that if he left now and told his superiors that he was worried about the Germans because they were looking at the sky funny and looking at the ground funny, that it would make him look like he was being paranoid and not a good leader. And so ultimately, Vladimir just looked at this cluster inside of the trench and decided, you know what, they're not shooting at us, there's no attack happening, so whatever they're doing, it can't be that big of a deal, and lately, no one's done anything, so why would that change now? And so Vladimir left the walls of Auschwitz Fortress and went down below to hang out with his friends. 3 days later, at 4 in the morning, the Russian soldiers who were up along the Auschwitz Fortress walls keeping watch that night noticed something strange out in the darkness near where the Germans were. When they looked out, they saw that the dark night air almost looked kind of blurry or wavy, kind of like if you were looking at air coming off of hot pavement on a sunny day, it would look kind of blurry.
Uh-oh.
That's what the night sky looked like to them. But of course, it couldn't be because of heat and sun, because it's the morning, it's cold, it's dark outside. And so as these Russians are looking out, not sure what to make of this blurry air, they began calling up more Russians to go have a look and figure out what this was. And over the next couple of minutes, as the Russians looked out from behind the walls at this air, they realized what it was. It was this huge grayish-green cloud that was as wide as the fortress was, and the wind was blowing it in their direction. Now, the Russian soldiers had no idea what this was, and so they just kind of stood there.
Hey, Smoke Daddy. Nice for you to stop by.
Watching it in stunned silence. And as they watched, they saw as the cloud would touch any vegetation like leaves on trees or the high grass in the marsh, it would all turn black and shrivel up. And then the soldiers began hearing a soft thump, 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 thump out in the darkness. And it was the sound of birds dying and falling to the ground that were inside of this cloud. At this point, the Russians began to panic, and they began to run to sound the alarm to get the other soldiers up to prepare for an attack. But as they did, they began to smell this very harsh chemical smell coming into the fortress, and then before long...
No, this is like a legit true story of like you'll see. Just ask me that. Maxwell English. This is actually a true story during World War One.
All the Russians could hear was the sound of their comrades coughing. It would turn out that strange behavior that Vladimir saw 3 days earlier of the German officers huddled together looking at the sky and then looking down at the ground and then back at the sky again, what they were doing was preparing for a chemical attack on Auschwitz Fortress. On the ground, out of sight of Vladimir, were canisters containing the poisonous gas, and when the officers would look up and put their hands up, they were gauging if the wind was strong enough and in the right direction to launch the attack. Now, 3 days ago, the wind had not been in their favor, but this morning at 4 a.m. on August 6th, 1915, the wind had been in their favor, and they had released the gas. And this gas was quite possibly the worst gas you could ever come up against on the battlefield. It was a combination of chlorine gas and bromine gas. On their own, chlorine and bromine are very toxic and can kill you. But when you mix those two gases, it becomes exponentially more dangerous. The gas mixture binds to moisture and then turns the moisture into hydrochloric acid, meaning
Oh, yeah.
if a person who did not have a gas mask on came in contact with this poisonous gas, When they inhaled it, it would literally fill their lungs with acid, which would dissolve them from the inside out. And then also, the gas would get into their eyes and into their nose, and the acid there would burrow holes into their skull. And once you've come in contact with this gas, there's nothing anybody can do to save you. You're gonna die, except it's gonna take a really, really long time. You don't just immediately dissolve. It's this
It'll take time.
long, drawn-out, excruciatingly painful process. By this point in World War I, chemical warfare was really not being used by anybody, and so as a result, the Russian army did not outfit their soldiers with gas masks. The German army did, and they knew the Russian army did not. So, as this horrific poisonous gas began permeating every square inch of Auschwitz Fortress, all of these Russian soldiers had nothing they could do to protect themselves from this gas. And so right away, soldiers began bleeding from their eyes and their mouths and their ears, and they literally began coughing up chunks of their lung. And so very quickly, the Russians inside the fortress understood they were being poisoned. And so these soldiers that were not as affected, at least not right away, by this gas, quickly began ripping off their shirts, dunking them in water, and wrapping them around their heads to try to limit how much they breathed in of this chemical. But it really didn't do much to stop the chemical. In fact, these makeshift gas masks might have made it worse because the gas would have bound to the moisture on the shirt. And so the Russians were totally doomed. They were surrounded on all sides outside the walls by their enemy, and then inside the fortress was this gas, and there was no ventilation.
Yeah, exactly. The backstory of Call of Duty World at War.
In the fortress, and so there was nowhere to go. They couldn't escape.
Like the Nazi zombies.
Death.
This is the backstory of how the Nazi zombies started.
No matter where they went. And so Vladimir, he was one of the guys that was still on his feet inside of the fortress.
Good night, Ellie. Nice for you to stop by.
And he stumbled over to this narrow window on the side of the fortress walls, and he looked out and he saw all these Germans running towards them, firing their machine guns, artillery's being fired. I mean, he knows they are moments away from the Germans reaching the fortress door.
Oh my god, that's right. They did use like ghost like sound like recordings and shit. During the Vietnam War for the North Vietnamese to surrender.
Coming inside and killing every last one of them. But Vladimir's reaction to this was not being scared or being sad. Instead, he suddenly felt incredibly motivated. If they're going to come in here and kill us, then we're going to make it as hard as humanly possible first. Vladimir had a reputation for being totally fearless. Over the past 6 months that they had been under siege from the German army out in their trenches, anytime fighting broke out, Vladimir was always the first to run up and be right on the front line.
Oh my god, this is like the most badass fucking story I've ever heard in my entire fucking life. Starting now.
Fighting, and then several times
this Vladimir guy was a fucking bad fucking ass.
when his comrades had been shot or wounded, Vladimir would run out into the line of fire to save the fallen soldiers. It was like Vladimir lacked any instinct for self-preservation. And so as the Germans continued their run towards the fortress, artillery shells are hitting the walls, there's constant gunfire.
He was like, this fucking, if I'm gonna die, I'm just gonna fucking save everyone that I fucking can. God damn, I love this guy.
And Vladimir, he leaves his window and he marches back over to the open courtyard inside of this fortress where the 100 or so other still living Russian soldiers were. I mean, they're all gonna die. They've been totally poisoned by this gas, and it's just a matter of time now, but they're still on their feet, and Vladimir walks over to them, and even though, again, he's pretty junior, he stands up and he says to them, "This is our moment. We are all going to die. But what we do right now will define us." And the way Vladimir said it, he got those 100 soldiers who were on death's door to be so motivated so quickly that they rallied to him. And so as these men are literally bleeding out of their eyes, their mouths, they're coughing up pieces of their lung, Vladimir explained the plan. And then moments later, with Vladimir in the front, this gaggle of soon-to-die...
Gaggle. Who the hell? Oh, that's a funny word, gaggle.
Russian soldiers charged towards the gates.
Again.
Gaggle of soon-to-die Russian soldiers charged towards...
Yeah, you have to remember, guys, they're about to die. They're going to die, regardless. So, this is why I think this is the most badass fucking story ever.
the gates. Gaggle of soon-to-die Russian soldiers charged towards the gates, opened the fortress, and began running out towards the Germans, screaming with their bayonets lowered. Now, the Germans on the outside fully expected that this chemical attack would kill all of the Russians, that taking Auschwitz Fortress would be super routine because when they walked in, everybody would be dead. And so suddenly to have the fortress open and have these men that are covered in bloody rags and they're puking up pieces of their organs and they're stumbling forward like zombies with bayonets out, screaming like banshees, it scared the living out of the...
Just imagine that. This thinking, you're gonna thinking like exactly that. It was gonna be able to walk in the fucking park, and all of a sudden, like, you're expecting everyone to be fucking, like, majority of everyone, like, either dying or, like, not expecting any, like, offense from, like, the other side at all. And then all of a sudden to see that fucking, like, open, and then, like, these soldiers, like, yeah, that's, like, you know what I mean. Literally walking like a fucking zombie, like, bleeding every, like, oh my god, I can... This is where we got Nazi zombies from, ladies and gentlemen.
Germans. In fact, it scared the living out of the Germans.
And this is the first time I've heard Mr. Ballin curse is from this story.
Like banshees, it scared the living out of the Germans. In fact, they were so quickly terrified by what they saw, they literally dropped their guns, turned, and began running back towards their trenches. And as they did, Vladimir and his dead man army began picking off the Germans one by one. And then after Vladimir and the dead man army ran out of ammunition, they just continued staggering forward directly into the thousands of Germans in front of them and began picking up dead German weapons and firing them. And then when they got up to the trenches where these retreating Germans had been so scared they had run into their own barbed wire, and so there's all these retreating Germans stuck on the barbed wire, the Russians just began bayoneting all these men that were stuck. And so at some point, as Vladimir is doing this, a German soldier ran up to him and bayoneted Vladimir right in the stomach. He ran him all the way through until the barrel of the gun was right up against his stomach. And Vladimir apparently...
This is the most badass fucking part of this story.
German soldier ran up to him and bayoneted Vladimir right in the stomach. He ran him all the way through until the barrel of the gun was right up against his stomach. And Vladimir apparently looked down at this bayonet, knew he had been completely run through, and he looked up at the German who had just stabbed...
Hey, Daycon versus Dark and Mandy S. Nice for y'all to stop by. Stop by at a perfect timing.
him, who was still holding the gun, and Vladimir spit blood and lung tissue all over this German's face, and then just began screaming directly at this guy. And so the German was so scared, he just dropped the gun, turned, tried to run, and then Vladimir was back on his gun with the bayonet still in his stomach, shooting at the Germans. The Germans were so completely caught off guard and terrified by Vladimir's dead man army counterattack that even though they outnumbered the Russians 70-1, they failed to take Auschwitz Fortress. The main reason for that was the Germans who had escaped the counterattack and made it back to their trenches. They told the other German soldiers that the Russians had turned into zombies, literally.
See? Here we go!
That they were undead, and so attacking them was pointless. They're already dead. And the Germans were so scared, they refused to leave their trenches again. Once the Russians could tell they had successfully forced a retreat by the German army, Vladimir, who was still alive at this point with a gun still stuck in his gut from the bayonet,
Oh my fucking
He
god.
called out to the rest of his soldiers to retreat back to the fortress. And so this handful of Russian soldiers who were about to die, they hobbled their way back inside of their fortress, and then Vladimir gave his final command: destroy the fortress. If we can't have it, nobody can. Every single Russian soldier that came in contact with that poisonous gas died, including Vladimir. When the Germans did eventually take Auschwitz Fortress at a later date, when again, all of the Russians were dead, when the Germans went inside, they realized the fortress had been destroyed and it was no longer strategically valuable. Vladimir would be awarded posthumously Russia's highest military honor. His actions and the actions of the other dying soldiers that fought alongside him are remembered today in stories, songs, and statues all across Russia.
I mean, just knowing you're going to die and then doing that big final stand, that's fucking badass. Like that's literally like how I would want to go out, is just fighting until I'm fucking dead. That's literally drunken Falcor here. Not really. Close. Literally. Goddamn. But yeah. That's how I would literally want to go out, is fighting until I'm fucking dead. And that's what happened. That's why I fucking love this story. And that is also a good like theory on what created the Jesus Christ, Majestic. I just want to slug myself in the fucking mouth right now. Talking like a fucking idiot. Good theory about the Nazi zombies. 2. What created the Nazi zombies in Call of Duty? World at War. Anyways. Now back to the animal killing. Jesus Christ. Actually, no. I'm gonna do another Mr. Ballin' Billy. I swear to God, Majestic, I just want to slap myself in the fucking mouth. Can't even talk properly. Somewhat. Let's see. This is Mr. Ballin's newest video. Video story. It's called Time Traveler is a Killer and Has the Receipts. Very intrigued.
In our lives, all of us have to make really difficult decisions from time to time. Sometimes we make the right call, and other times we don't. Today's story is about someone who did the latter, but really, the story is about what this person did to try to fix their bad decision. Simply put, this story takes a totally
I'll be
unexpected
right back,
turn,
but I'm gonna let it play.
And unless you've heard it before, there's no way you're gonna see it coming. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please move all of the strike plates in the like button's door frames slightly lower so that anytime they try to close the door, they won't latch. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
A gaggle of Russian zombies.
On a cold day in January of 2017, a 26-year-old man named William Hargrove paced anxiously back and forth inside of his tiny bedroom. Will was nervous because he was about to take the biggest chance of his life. He was about to ask a woman, who he had only known for a few weeks, if she would marry him. Will looked around his bedroom and he saw there was dirty clothes coming out of his hamper and there was fast food trash all over the ground, and so he knew this was not the ideal location to ask someone to marry him, but he also knew he was running out of time. The woman he wanted to propose to, who was sitting right behind him on his bed, was about to head back to Russia where she lived in just a few hours. And so Will finally stopped pacing. He turned to face this woman on the bed who was just sitting there silently. And Will was about to say something, but then he chickened out and just kept on pacing. To that point, Will's
Fuck.
life had been pretty boring and lonely. He worked a low-paying job
Oh, look at the little kitty.
Hey, well, kitty cat.
as a mechanic, and he lived in this bedroom. This was his apartment, this one room, which was being rented to him by a married couple who owned the house it was in. And this house was in a small city in the US state of Oregon. Will didn't really have any friends, and he didn't really have any meaningful hobbies. All he really had was his intense love of science fiction and fantasy. He would lose himself for hours watching movies about outer space and strange, distant alien planets and magic. And then often, after he would watch these movies, he would walk into the forest near his house, and he would just kind of wander around daydreaming about these movies, and he would pretend he was the hero from these movies. And suddenly, in his mind, Will would become a sorcerer with great powers, or a brilliant scientist who went back in time to save the world. But as much as Will loved daydreaming and fantasizing, what he really wanted was a wife and kids. And so recently, he had joined an international dating website, and it was through that website that he connected with 26-year-old Anna Repkina from Russia, who was the woman sitting on the bed behind him. And now, if Will could just muster the courage to pop the question to her, he was confident she would say yes, and he could finally start his real life with Anna. Anna, who had blonde hair and striking blue eyes, was a bit of a dreamer like Will. For example, she fundamentally believed that there was a soulmate somewhere in the world for everyone. However, to that point in her life, she had not found her soulmate. Instead, she had been through one bad breakup after another. But a few weeks earlier, when a short, stocky, bald guy with a bushy goatee, Will, had reached out to her on an international dating website and invited her to America to visit him, she believed it was fate that they were being brought together.
Oh my god, this is like 90 Day Fiance.
And so Will had to be her soulmate. Will finally stopped pacing and turned again to face Anna, who was now reading a book on the edge of the bed. And Will, who was terrified at this point, took a deep breath and then reached into his pocket and pulled out a jewelry box. Inside of it was a beautiful emerald ring that was situated on a white gold band. And so Will took a step towards Anna, he dropped down to a knee, and he held out the jewelry box, and he opened it up. At first, Anna didn't know what Will was
god
doing.
damn it,
and was
this
kind of
is like 90
confused.
Day Fiance
But
that
when she
went
saw the
wrong.
ring
This is like 90 Day Fiance that went totally fucking wrong.
and saw him on his knee, she knew what was happening, and she began trembling
shit.
with excitement. And then Will, he pulled the ring out of its holder, and he slipped it onto Anna's finger, and he asked her if she would marry him. And Anna, she began
Jesus.
crying tears of joy and shouted, yes. Later that day, Anna would fly back home to Russia, but as soon as she landed, she began getting her affairs in order to go right back to Oregon to live with Will permanently. And 2 months later, in March of 2017, Anna was touching back down at the Oregon airport, and then right near the baggage claim, she had her big reunion with Will. That evening, when Anna and Will drove from the airport to Will's place, they parked the car, they got out, they grabbed Anna's luggage, they went up the front steps, and when Will unlocked the front door to go inside of the house to make their way up to his bedroom apartment, as soon as the door swung open, there was a woman standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, staring out at both of them. This woman was 34-year-old Michelle Chavez, and she and her husband were the married couple who rented the bedroom apartment to Will. Michelle had dark hair and piercing eyes, and even when she was being pleasant, she could be very intimidating.
She has the killer eyes.
And right now, it was obvious she was not trying to be pleasant. And so Anna, who sensed something was wrong here, kind of awkwardly said hi to Michelle, but Michelle, she just glared at Anna and said nothing, and then looked from Anna to Will and said, Will, I need to talk to you. And then before Will could say anything, Michelle grabbed his arm and began dragging him through the house to the back. And as Will is kind of stumbling along after Michelle, he tried to be calm and told Anna, just go ahead and take your stuff up to the room. I'll be up there in a minute. And so Anna, she's very confused about what's happening here. She does not understand this dynamic at all, but she began taking her suitcases and marching over to the side of the house where Will's bedroom was. And as she did this, she could hear on the other side of the house Michelle really yelling at Will, but Anna couldn't make out what Michelle was actually saying. And so at some point, when Anna was now inside of Will's bedroom, just kind of waiting, Will finally did come into the bedroom with his head hung down low, and Anna could just tell that, obviously he's just been yelled at, he looks defeated, and so Anna's trying to make eye contact with him, and finally, Will looks up at Anna, and Anna says, hey, what's going on? Why was she so upset? What's happening here? And in a quiet, trembling voice, Will would tell Anna that Michelle and her husband had just told him that they can't live here anymore. They have to move out. Anna couldn't believe this. She had just flown across the world to be here with Will, and now they don't have a place to live. But she could tell, obviously, Will is really upset about this too. And so instead of just being mad at him, she said, what's going on? Why is she kicking us out? And at first, Will kind of acted like he didn't really know. But then eventually, when Anna kept asking for more information, he would tell her that Michelle sort of had a crush on him. And when she saw Anna moving in with Will, she became really jealous and told them to leave. When Anna brought up the fact that Michelle was married, Will said, I know, she's married, the crush hasn't gone anywhere, but she still feels really jealous. Anna was obviously really upset about this situation, but after Will had explained what's going on with Michelle, Anna wasn't mad at Michelle, she actually felt kind of bad for her. It was sort of pathetic that this married woman was acting the way she was. And so Anna actually figured that really this is probably for the best, that we should get away from Michelle. And within a few days, Anna and Will had moved out of Michelle's place and found a place of their own in a neighboring town. And as soon as they were settled inside of there, it was like relief washed over both of them. And they both became really excited to plan their wedding and think about their future together.
Okay, never mind. I thought they were already about to get butchered and everything. But possibly. Hey, damn it.
Thank you to BetterHelp,
Hold on.
mainstream as it is today. And that's great that it's mainstream. We want society to see that mental health care is a critical part of our overall health. Society to see that mental health
That's right.
out in the open. It wasn't taboo.
Yeah, I'm dealing with it. I just got over a little bit of mine. I'm doing a lot better. If you do have mental health, let me know. I mean, talk to me if you want to. I'm not a talker either. I don't know. But yeah, don't be afraid to talk to someone. Please, for the love of God. I love you. We all love you. Even though that it doesn't seem like it. Good God. There's a lot of people that do care about you. You do matter. We all love you. So, that's my spiel. Lucille. For the day.
Boo, but it certainly wasn't as mainstream as it is today. And that's great that it's mainstream. We want society to see that mental health care is a critical part of our overall health. But no matter how mainstream mental health care becomes,
Anyways, yeah, that's not Mr. Ballin.
and seeking out society, it will always come down to you. And
Yeah, it will. Anyways. I'm gonna skip over this ad. Sorry, guys. Oh, God damn it.
Mr. Ballin.
But yeah, if you want to, go to that website too, that Mr. Ballin. It's right there on screen. Go to it if you like, or contact if you're feeling not yourself, suicidal or whatever, contact the National Suicide Hotline. I don't have the number on me currently, but I'm sorry. God damn it. I think it's like 899 you can text. If I remember correctly. Oh, God damn it. Don't. Oh. I think it is 899, but you can also look it up. I'm sorry, guys, but yeah. There we go. Right there. I love you guys.
I've also
I want you here. Hang around with me.
linked them in the description below. Okay, back to the story. A few weeks later, on March 25th, 2017, Anna woke up
988. There it is. Thank you, SJB Dwella.
early and put on her beautiful, simple white wedding dress that she brought from Russia, and then she and Will piled into his car and they headed to the beach. The couple had decided to go with a very simple, intimate outdoor wedding ceremony led by an officiant. An officiant is someone who can legally conduct a wedding. When the couple arrived at the beach, Anna hopped out and immediately began walking over the sand towards the water, and Will stayed back to call the officiant because he didn't see him anywhere. And so when Anna reached the water, she took in the beautiful sights and sounds of the beach, she felt the sun on her face, and she listened to the sound of the waves crashing, and it was like suddenly she realized how lucky she was. I mean, this wedding day was turning out to be perfect, when over the past couple of weeks, she wasn't sure if it was even going to happen. Even though Anna and Will had left Michelle's house and had no contact with her, over the past couple of weeks, Michelle had become a sort of thorn in their side, sending Anna all these really threatening messages, things like demanding that Anna share Will with her, or else she'll do something awful. And so Anna is thinking that Michelle is going to find a way to sabotage their wedding, but here they were on the beach about to get married.
Nice fun fact right there, Bunny. Sour candy. I love sour candy anyways, regardless, so... Anything sour, like Sour Patch Kids, Warheads. I fucking love Warheads. Sour Skittles. Sour Skittles and Warheads. And Sour Patch Kids. Best stuff around.
Married with no Michelle in sight. And so at some point, Anna looked along the beach and saw a little bit farther along were the two
And Granny Smith apples.
friends that she and Will had invited to be a part of their wedding. And so Anna ran over to them and she hugged them and began chatting with them. And as she's chatting, she looks up and she sees Will coming down onto the beach, and he's on his cell phone. And Anna can't tell what he's saying. He's too far away, but it's obvious there's something wrong. And by the time Will actually got up to the group, he had hung up his phone, but it was very obvious he was really upset. And as soon as he reached the group, he would announce to Anna and their friends that the officiant was not going to be able to make it.
Kiwi. I know what you mean, though, SJP Dwella. Sorry.
And so, unfortunately, the wedding was off, at least for now.
I know what you meant, though.
Now, Anna was totally crushed by this, but she could tell Will also was totally crushed by this. And so instead of crying and making Will feel worse, Anna put on a brave face and told Will, "Don't worry about it. We will find another officiant. We'll reschedule this. It will be fine." And so Anna and Will's friends, they said bye and they headed their way, and Anna and Will had a very somber walk along the beach back to their car. But on the drive from the beach back to their apartment, they would stop at a fast food restaurant, McDonald's, and they would get some food, and by the time they had made it back to their apartment, they were laughing about how ridiculous it was that they were eating fast food in their wedding clothes. A couple weeks later, Anna was still in the process of rescheduling their wedding, and she was starting to feel very frustrated with Will. Over the last week or so, Will, instead of helping her with the wedding, was spending much of his time outside of the apartment, pacing around, chain smoking, while talking to someone on the phone. Now, Anna didn't know who he was talking to, but based on how stressed out he seemed, Anna assumed he had to be talking to either Michelle or talking to someone else about Michelle. Regardless, Anna knew this had to, in some way, be connected to Michelle. However, whenever Anna would approach Will and ask him why he was so stressed and whether or not he was still in contact with Michelle,
She has those fucking crazy eyes.
Will would try to change the subject, or he would just clam up and not talk at all. But finally, on April 16th, so 3 weeks after the couple's first failed wedding attempt, Will would approach Anna and ask her very sheepishly if she would come with him on a walk through the woods, because he had something important he wanted to tell her. Now, Anna knew that Will loved walking in these woods. He still went off and daydreamed after his movies. And so she knew that if he's asking her to go out there to talk, that this was going to be a very serious conversation, most likely about Michelle and whatever's going on. And so the couple piled into Will's car and they drove to the parking lot right near the woods. They got out, they hopped on a path, and they began walking into the trees. And for a while, they didn't really talk to each other. They just walked quietly side by side through the woods. But at some point, Will began to slow down and then finally came to a full stop, at which point Anna stopped too, and she turned to face him. And when she did, Will paused for a moment and then with a shaky voice told Anna that he felt like they rushed into their relationship and he wanted to call off the engagement. Anna was so caught off guard and heartbroken by what she was hearing that she couldn't say anything. She just stood there in
Oh shit.
stunned silence, and then finally just turned around and stormed off away from Will deeper into the woods until she was out of Will's sight. The next day, when Will woke up, the first thing he did was pick up his phone and text Anna. But Anna didn't write back. And so as Will is laying in bed, he couldn't help but feel this overwhelming sense of regret about the decision he had made the day before. He wanted Anna back. So, over the course of the next several hours, Will would send Anna a series of increasingly more desperate-sounding text messages, pleading with her to just talk to him, please. But she didn't respond to any of his messages. And so Will decided that the only way he could get Anna back would be if he did something big. So he hopped out of his bed, he grabbed his cigarettes, he went outside, and he began pacing and chain smoking, trying to come up with whatever big idea was going to get Anna back. And at some point, an idea came to him. He would do what he had seen heroes do in several of his favorite science fiction and fantasy movies. He would use time travel to go back in time and get Anna back. Feeling totally energized by this idea, Will ran back inside his apartment, he grabbed another pack of cigarettes, a 6-pack of soda, and then he sat down at his computer and he scoured the internet for any information about how to build a time-traveling machine. And for the next 24 to 48 hours, Will stayed at his computer, chain smoking and drinking sodas, drawing all these sketches of different time machine designs that he found on the internet. But at some point, after 24 to 48 hours, Will realized that no matter how good these sketches were, he lacked 1, the resources, and 2, the knowledge and expertise of how to take this sketch and actually make it into a real physical time machine. And so feeling totally frustrated, Will took a sketchbook and threw it, and then lay down on his bed, feeling somewhat defeated. But as he laid there thinking about Anna, he had another epiphany. In other science fiction and fantasy movies, sometimes the heroes didn't need to use time machines to go back in time, they would use magic. And so suddenly Will decided, oh my goodness, I need to find the right magical spell that will allow me to travel back in time and get Anna. And so once again, he ran back to his computer,
Oh, Jesus.
continued chain smoking and drinking sodas while scouring the
So this guy hasn't slept for 48 hours and he's about to stay
internet
up.
looking for the right magical spell that would take him back in time, and several times he communicated with strangers
I'm sorry
on
that
the
I'm
internet.
not. I'm sorry that I'm not that talkative right now. I'm just like really intrigued with everything going on right now.
Telling them that he would sell his soul to them if they could give him the right spell. And then anytime he thought he found the right spell, he would
Time machine.
close his eyes and chant the words out loud, and then open his eyes only to realize he was stuck in the present. And so finally, after basically staying awake for 72 hours on this quest to go back in time to get Anna back, Will realized that it was not going to work, and so he gave up. The next morning, on April 19th, so this is 3 days after he broke up with Anna in the woods, Will heard a knock on his front door. And when he opened the door, there were 2 police officers standing there. And when Will asked them, what's going on, they told him that they actually needed his help, and would he mind coming to the station to talk to them. And so Will, he was still totally exhausted from not having slept over the last 3 days, but he of course agreed to go. And when he got to the police station, he was led into a small interview room, and he sat down behind this metal desk in front of the other 2 officers, and he asked them, what can I do for you? And one of the officers eventually asked Will if he had recently eaten at a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant. That's a fast food restaurant also known as KFC. Will was puzzled and almost wanted to laugh because he couldn't understand how this was important. But when he saw that these 2 officers were not making light of this at all, they were very serious, Will said, yeah, a few days ago I did eat at a KFC. Why does that matter? To understand why it mattered, we need to understand the relationship between Will and Michelle. It would turn out Michelle did not just have a crush on Will. Michelle and Will had been having an intense affair right in Michelle's house with her husband since 2015. So a full year before Will met Anna. Now, Will had wanted Michelle to leave her husband and be with him, and Michelle had told Will that she wanted the same thing, but she couldn't do it right now. And so to show Will that she was serious, that one day she would be with him, she gave him her wedding ring, which was an emerald stone sitting on a white gold band. It was like a promise ring, that this is my token to you to show you that one day we will be together in public. But as time went on, Michelle didn't really show any signs of trying to leave her husband, and so Will started to wonder if he was just kind of letting his life slip by. Because remember, Will really wanted a wife and kids, and it was starting to look like Michelle was not going to give him either of those things. And so that was why Will went on that dating site and contacted Anna, and then when he learned that Anna wanted a family too, he had asked her to marry him. The ring that Will gave Anna when he proposed to her was the same ring that Michelle had given Will, her wedding ring, the promise ring. And so when Michelle saw that ring on Anna's finger on a Facebook post that Anna made about having been proposed to by Will, Michelle was enraged. And then, just a few weeks later, when Anna showed up at Michelle's house to move into Will's bedroom with him, she grabbed Will, dragged him to the side of the house, and said, "You need to choose right now between me and Anna." And because Will couldn't come up with an answer, Michelle kicked him and Anna out of the house. However, over the following weeks, despite Michelle having booted them from her property, she could not let go of her jealousy of Anna and her love for Will. And so she sent Anna all these threatening messages on Facebook demanding that she share Will with her or else. And she began incessantly calling and texting Will, demanding that he choose her over Anna. And so when Anna saw Will walking around outside chain-smoking cigarettes on the phone, Anna was right in suspecting that that was Michelle that he was talking to. But despite all this pressure, Will just could not make up his mind. He didn't know which woman he wanted to be with more. And so to buy himself some time, he had lied to Anna about hiring an officiant for their wedding on the beach. And then when they arrived on the beach and Will said the officiant had canceled, it was all a ruse. There was never any officiant. He was just trying to buy time for himself. But finally, on April 16th, for whatever reason, Will had decided that he knew which woman he wanted to go with. He wanted to go with Michelle. So he brought Anna out into the woods and he told her the news, that he was breaking off the engagement and effectively their relationship was over, at which point Anna turned and stormed off into the woods. And so Will, he watched her disappear, and then he turned around and walked back along the path back toward his car. And when he got there, he opened his trunk and got something out of it, and then he walked back along the trail into the woods where he had seen Anna last. And when he reached that spot, he kind of walked off in the direction that Anna had wandered, and eventually he spotted Anna. She was standing in a clearing, looking up into the sky, seemingly lost in thought. And so Will quietly walked up right behind her, and then he raised the shotgun he had gotten out of his trunk. He placed the barrel against the back of Anna's skull, and before she could even react, say something, turn around, do anything, he pulled the trigger. Afterward, he ran back down the trail to his car and he gathered up all
He literally blew her head off.
of Anna's things that happened to be inside of the car, along with some trash on the floor of the car. And then he brought all of that stuff back into the woods and kind of dumped it both on and around Anna's body. The next day, a walker and their dog happened to come across Anna's body, and when the police were called out to the site, they began sifting through all of the trash that was kind of scattered around Anna's body. And inside of a crumpled up KFC bag, the police would find a receipt for the day of the murder.
Yeah, Mandy, yes, this is my first time hearing this right now on his channel. This is fucked.
And that receipt,
Wait, what?
the police would find a receipt. And
Hold on.
in sifting through all of the trash that was kind of scattered around Anna's body, and inside of a crumpled up KFC bag, the police would find a receipt for the day of the murder. And that receipt belonged to Will. The morning after Will killed Anna, he sent those initial text messages to Anna just to cover his tracks. But as he sent them, he actually did feel an enormous sense of regret about the decision he made. He no longer wanted Michelle, he wanted Anna. And it was at that point that he decided he would do what the heroes in some of his favorite movies did. He would go back in time and undo the murder and get his love back. But of course, his efforts would fail. And in January of 2020, 3 years after Anna's murder, Will was sentenced to life in prison. As for Michelle, she was never charged with any crime.
Oh, so Michelle.
3 years after Anna's
shit.
murder, Will was sentenced to life in prison. As for Michelle, she was never charged with any crime.
Huh. Okay. Bro, that was a plot twist of the century right there. Holy fuck. I'm telling you, though, Michelle was up to something. Fucking hell, that was fucking nuts. Wow. Let's continue Mr. Ballin. I have another Mr. Ballin video. This one's a good one. You know it's a good one when it says anxiety warning. It's called The Valley of Headless Men.
Today's story is a classic don't go in the woods type of story. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload 2 or 3 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please invite the like button over to your kid's birthday party and then ask them if they want to hit the piñata. When they say yes, put their blindfold on and then replace the piñata with a beehive. Also, please subscribe to our channel.
That poor like button over at Mr. Ballin's channel. Oh.
Their blindfold on and then replace the piñata with a beehive. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
Replace the piñata with a beehive.
Located in the far northwestern section of Canada is the aptly named Northwest Territories. It is a massive swath of land that virtually nobody lives inside of.
GTS,
To make that point crystal clear, consider the following. The country of Germany has a population of 83 million people, give or take. The Northwest Territories is 4 times as large as Germany, but only has a population of about 50,000 people. In addition to being this huge and mostly unoccupied space, the Northwest Territories are almost completely wild. Think dense forests, huge mountains, massive rivers and lakes, and lots of really big animals. Even for highly experienced outdoors men and women, the Northwest Territories can be a truly hazardous place. And within this truly hazardous place, there is one part that is the most hazardous, and it's right in the middle of the Northwest Territories. And it's this 11,000 square mile stretch of just pure wilderness that's called the Nahanni Valley. In 1976, the Nahanni Valley was made into a national park. But don't let that fool you. This is not some family park that anybody can go to. There are no tourist accommodations, so there's no hotels, there's really nothing inside of it. And there are no roads that lead into this park. The only way you can get inside this valley is by plane or by boat or by very stressful and difficult overland hike. But for those who are able and willing to make the effort to get inside of this valley, you have the opportunity to explore one of the most beautiful places on the planet, because this section of the world is almost completely untouched by man. It is really nature at its purest form. However, there's a catch. This valley is said to be haunted. Over the last 10,000 years, the handful of native tribes that have
Oh, of course, the natives.
attempted to settle inside of the Nahanni Valley have
It's
all
cursed.
either suddenly disappeared without a trace, like the Naha tribe, that literally overnight just was gone, leaving behind their shelters, their food, their supplies, just gone. No one knows what happened to them.
Jesus.
Or the tribes have abruptly fled, claiming they were being terrorized or stalked by creatures lurking in the forest, like these white demons and these large wolves they called wahilas. Now, of course, this just sounds like folklore, and it might very well be that that's all it is, folklore. But starting in the early 1900s, some very strange things started happening in the Nahanni Valley that were not folklore. These things happened, and they were horrifying. These were horrifying, real events. And they might, depending on your viewpoint, give credit to some of the theories that the native tribes people have about this valley, which is there's something evil lurking out in this forest, but we just don't know what it is. In 1904, three brothers, Willie, Frank, and Charlie McLeod, who all lived in the Northwest Territories, decided they wanted to go looking for gold in the Nahanni Valley. They figured, because so few people had ever been inside of this valley, that if there was gold to be found, then certainly it had not been found yet. And so after a very long and arduous journey using sled dogs and trains and homemade boats, they finally slipped into the valley and found themselves on what's called the Flat River, which runs right through the center of the Nahanni Valley. Now, the Flat River is kind of ironically named because it's anything but flat. It's actually more like a rapid at certain points. But either way, the three brothers, they're on their boat, they're making their way up the Flat River, and at some point they pull off onto the riverbank and they set up camp. And then once their camp is set up, they go down to the river and they put their gold sluices in the water. A gold sluice is this long, skinny box that's usually made of wood, and it has a strainer on one side. And gold miners will put it in the water, submerged, and they will kind of shovel the sediment on the bottom of the water into this little funnel, and the big stuff will get stopped by the strainer, and the dirt and the water will just kind of flow out the side. And so the idea is you can trap gold nuggets inside of this sluice. And so the three brothers, they get their sluices up, and they start looking for gold, and right away they hit pay dirt. There is tons of gold in this river. And so all day, all night, they get all this gold. The next morning, they do the same thing. And by the time all their containers are literally filled to the brim with gold, they decide, hey, let's go back and turn this in, get some money for it, and then come back out here. And so they pack up their tent, they pack up all their supplies, and they put everything back in their boat. They get out onto Flat River, and at some point, very early on in their journey back, the boat capsizes, and the boat actually breaks apart from the strength of the rapids of Flat River. And so the boat actually just sinks, and much of their supplies sink, including all of their gold.
Oh.
But the three brothers are able to grab some of their supplies, like their rifle and some lumber and some of their mining supplies, and they swim it all to shore. They catch their breath. They're totally devastated at the loss of the gold, but they're alive. They have enough supplies to survive. And so they figure all they can do is maybe try to go back to their original site, try to get some more gold because they did still have a sluice, and then try to get out of there and then, regroup and come back another time. And so using some of the lumber they recovered from their broken boat, and then also by cutting down some trees, they literally fashioned another boat and then hopped back on the Flat River, and they went back up to that site where they had found gold earlier. They set up their sluice, they set up their camp again, and this time they didn't find any gold. So all day, this very disappointing day that they've already lost all their gold, now they're not finding any more gold. And so that night when they went to bed, they decided that the next day they were just going to leave. And so the next day they get up, they pack up, they hop back on the Flat River on this new boat they built, and they're able to make their way out of the valley and get back to their homes. As soon as they get back home, the two younger brothers, Willie and Frank, start talking about how they want to go back into Nahanni Valley and go get more gold, because now they know there's gold out there. It's not a question, yeah, we didn't find it that second time, but we know it's out there. Charlie, the older brother, he wanted to get the gold, but he felt like, hey, that was a close call with the boat flipping over. I don't know if it's a good idea, so I'm actually not going to go. You guys can go, I'm going to stay. And so several months goes by, and Frank and Willie have been doing all this preparation for this additional trip into the valley. And finally, in 1905, they're ready. And so Willie, Frank, and a third man called Robert Weir, who was a friend of theirs, he was going to replace Charlie. The three of them, they make their way up into the valley. Now, they didn't tell anyone how long they were going to be gone for, and so when they didn't send any word and no one had heard from them in weeks, Charlie was actually not that concerned because he knew there was lots of gold to be had out in the Nahanni Valley, and so he figured they must have struck it rich, and now they've decided to live out there long term, or at least maybe through the summer, or maybe the next year, and so he wasn't concerned, and because he wasn't concerned, nobody else was concerned about these three men. And so weeks turned into months, turned into a year, and still no one's heard from these three men. No one's heard from Willie, Frank, or from Robert, but still Charlie maintains that nothing can be wrong because there's three of them out there. They're incredibly experienced. There is a ton of gold out there. I'm sure they're just killing it and they're just acquiring all this gold, and we're going to see them in the next couple of months maybe, and everything's going to be just fine. But a whole other year would go by. So they've been out there for 2 years and no one has heard from them. And at this point, Charlie thinks to himself, okay, I have to go out and see if they're okay. And so he rounds up 4 other people from his town and he mounts an expedition to head back into the Nahanni Valley to go find his 2 brothers and find Robert Weir. Charlie and his search party eventually, after yet another long and arduous journey, they get into Nahanni Valley and they get onto the Flat River. And so they start making their way upstream along Flat River. So it must have been a very treacherous journey getting through the rapids of this river. And the whole time they're scanning the left and the right side, hoping to see some sign of life. They're looking for any indication that these 3 men are out here and just fine, but they didn't see any sign of them. And so they finally made their way all the way up to the very end of Flat River, or I should say the very beginning of Flat River, where it breaks off from a much larger river called the South Nahanni River. And once they turned onto the South Nahanni River, they began going downstream. And again, they're looking on either side for any sign of these 3 men. There's no sign of them. And then the river they're on takes a very sharp turn. It's actually called the Big Bend, and it's about a 45-degree turn. And as soon as you make that turn, it dumps you into this 10-mile stretch of river called Second Canyon. Now, along South Nahanni River, which is about 350 miles long, there are these 4 canyons that the water passes through. And they're labeled 4th Canyon, 3rd Canyon, 2nd Canyon, and 1st Canyon. And these canyons are massive. These sheer cliffs on either side of the river shoot up.
Is that gold alongside of this fucking
Up to
mountain?
3,000 feet above the water, and in some parts, the water
I don't know. I could be wrong. It looks like fucking gold. That's a lot of fucking gold. That's
is
real.
actually just as deep,
If that's
thousands
true-
of feet
If
deep.
I'm thinking,
And
if
Second
that's
Canyon is
gold.
unique because the cliff faces are as sheer as you're going to get, and the cliff faces almost butt up
Yeah, I don't mean shit to you. That's for you to stop by.
exactly up against the water. So there's really very little shoreline on either side. So once you're in this 10-mile stretch, you're basically boxed in. You have thousands of feet of water below you. You have these massive cliffs on either side, and there's really nowhere to go. You need to get through this section of the river before you can effectively get onto the shoreline and take a break from being in your boat. And along these cliffs are these openings you see high up all over the cliffs on both sides that are openings to these massive cave systems inside of these thousands of feet tall cliffs. And because of how difficult it is to not only get to Nahanni Valley, but also to get up to these different cave openings, nobody's gone inside of them. We don't know what's inside of these caves, save for the few that are down low enough that people can explore. So as you're passing through Second Canyon, it's almost like you're being watched because there's all these openings, but you can't see into them, and you're just forced to go down this 10-mile stretch, and you can't really go anywhere.
God.
And whatever's watching you, it's watching you. As soon as Charlie and his
Oh my God. This is like almost like a half hour. Yeah. God damn it. Majestic. Jesus Christ. Get your life together right now. Yes. It's almost a half hour long video.
search party entered into Second Canyon,
This story, oh my God, this is going to be
it
good.
would have immediately gotten darker, because that's another part of being in Second Canyon. These huge cliff walls of this canyon obscure the sunlight. And so they would have entered into this canyon, it would have gotten darker, and it's very windy inside of Second Canyon. So the winds would have picked up, so it's dark, very strange setting for them to be in, and they would have been looking on either side at these little strips of shoreline on either side, barely big enough for a boat to be. They would have been looking for any sign of life, but they didn't see anything. As they're making their way down this 10-mile stretch, as they're getting closer and closer to actually entering into First Canyon, which is the next canyon you would enter into, the sides of the river start to get slightly larger, where you could actually beach a boat. There's some trees, and on the left-hand side, right before exiting Second Canyon, they notice there is actually a tent perched within some trees. And so the search party naturally goes right over to the shoreline, they hop out, but as soon as they step foot on land and they have a clearer view of this tent and what's outside of it, they notice there is a body clearly lying on the ground outside of the tent. And so Charlie and the search party, they run over, and as soon as they're up close, they can tell this body is missing its head. And they see the clothes on this body are totally charred and burned, and whoever this was, they were reaching with their right arm when they died. And right outside of the reach of their right arm was a rifle that was propped up against a tree. And so they walk around this one body, and they go around towards the backside of the tent where the opening to this tent is, and they find another body, another very badly decomposed body, and it's positioned kind of halfway in the tent and halfway out of the tent. And there's a blanket kind of partially obscuring this person's body, and when they move the blanket, they see this body too is missing its head. So Charlie and the search party, they continue to search around the camp in hopes of finding the heads of these two people to try to figure out who they are, but they never find the heads. However, they do find some personal effects both in the pockets of these two bodies and then also inside the tent that would confirm these are Charlie's brothers. As for the third man that had been with them, Robert Weir, he was not at the campsite, and in fact he would never actually be found officially. However, a little ways down the river, another partial skeleton would be found several months later that was attributed to Robert. However, that was not 100% confirmed to be Robert. The only other interesting thing that was found at this campsite was a carving in a nearby tree, and it just said, "We have found a fine prospect," indicating that Charlie's brothers had found gold. But there was no gold either on them or in their camp or in the river nearby. Nothing. There was no gold. Charlie and his search party would leave the valley and get in touch with the mounted police, who would come out to the site where the brothers had been found. They would launch an investigation, and ultimately they would come to the conclusion that all three of these men, the two brothers and Robert, had starved to death, and then after they had perished, animals had taken them off, which is why Robert was found so far away and why the skulls were missing from the two brothers. Now, Charlie did not believe that. He believed they had been attacked by native tribes in the area, but the police were not buying that. They said this was a natural thing, this was an accident, and so that's that. When the story of these two decapitated men made the news, people went crazy about this. People were very divided about what they thought really happened. There was a percentage of people that believed that partial skeleton that was found, that was not Robert Weir. He had not died. He had murdered the two brothers, decapitated them, and then made off with their gold. The other percentage of people believed that all three men, the two brothers and Robert, had been attacked by a person, a group of people, an animal, a creature, something. There was some sort of attack. And that's why the two brothers were in those positions that indicated they had encountered something horrifying, with one brother reaching for the gun and the other appearing to have leapt from his bed before he ultimately died. But regardless of which side you fell on, pretty much everybody at the time who heard about the story became terrified of the Nahanni Valley. Specifically, they became terrified of that stretch in Second Canyon where the two brothers had been found. And so actually that stretch got renamed the Headless Valley, and from that point forward, that's all it was known as. And so even though there were obvious gold prospects in the Headless Valley and all along the South Nahanni River and the Flat River, people after this story broke were just not prepared to risk going in there and potentially becoming another victim. And so people kind of stayed away from Nahanni Valley. 8 years later, though, in 1913, a gold prospector named Martin Jorgensen decided, you know what, I'm not going to let some scary stories about some headless men and, ghosts and killers on the loose, I'm not going to let any of that get in the way of me taking gold out of Nahanni Valley. So, all on his own, Martin makes the arduous trek inside of Nahanni Valley. He makes his way up Flat River, and he finally finds a spot about 70 miles upstream of where Headless Valley was, and he actually built a one-room cabin because he was going to stay there through the winter, and then the plan was he would meet up with his partners the following summer. And so right after he got there, he set up his sluices and he started mining for gold, and apparently he found a lot of it because he sent word back to his partners outside of the valley that he had made it rich. And so his partners were really excited to meet up with him the following summer and see how much he got, because they planned on going back into the valley with him that summer. So that summer rolls around, his partners go to the meeting spot right outside the valley, but Martin doesn't show up. And so his partners, they stay outside at this meeting space for several days until finally, when he doesn't show up, they decide, we have to go in there and see if he is okay, because at this point he should have been here. There's no excuse. And so they end up going into the Nahanni Valley. They make their way up Flat River, and they go roughly to the area where they knew he was staying based on the message he had sent earlier. He had described where he was staying, and they actually found his cabin. Or I should say they found what was left of his cabin. His cabin had been completely torched, burned to the ground, and laying on the ground next to the burned out cabin was the burned out remains of another headless corpse. And this corpse belonged to Martin Jorgensen. The police did a thorough investigation, but they were never able to determine what actually killed him. The police did not connect Martin's death with the two McLeod brothers' deaths, even though they were all decapitated. They were in roughly the same area, and it happened within a few years of each other, and they looked very, very similar. Even though that all was true, the police said, nope, these are totally separate. Martin died for some reason, and then animals took parts of him away, and that's why his skull is missing. Martin's skull was never located, and the gold that Martin claimed to have struck it rich with was also not at the cabin, not on him. There was no gold anywhere in the vicinity. When Martin's death made the news, people went crazy, and despite the police assuring everyone that his death was not connected to the McLeod brothers' deaths, even though the police were saying that, the public didn't see it that way. It was just too easy to connect one decapitation with two other decapitations that have happened close together in a relatively short time frame, and so a lot of people assumed there must be a killer on the loose somewhere in Nahanni Valley. 7 years later, in 1921, the rumors of a killer on the loose were still alive and well when gold prospector John O'Brien and his partner decided, you know what, despite the rumors of this so-called killer or whatever's going on in the Nahanni Valley, let's go into the Nahanni Valley and try our hand. Let's try to get some gold. And so the two of them made their way into the valley, and they set up camp in Headless Valley, not far from where the McLeod brothers had been found decapitated. So they set up their camp, and they're there for a couple of days. They're doing well. They're finding gold. And then at some point, John tells his partner that he's going to go out and check all of their traps along the river, and he'll be back in about 8 or 9 days. And so his partner waits 8 or 9 days, and John doesn't come back. And a couple of days after that goes by, and now John's past due, and so the partner decides he has to go out looking for him. And so there was another gold prospector in the area, and so this partner contacted him, and the two of them went to the river and began walking upstream until they found John. And he had frozen to death, but it was very interesting the way he was positioned. He was sitting in front of this obviously previously lit campfire. He wasn't hunched over. He didn't look like he was in pain. He looked like he was just enjoying the fire. There was nothing on his face that indicated discomfort or pain or fear. He was even holding the matchbook in his hand. It was like he was just sitting there enjoying the fire when something caused him to suddenly freeze. In fact, witnesses would say John looked like he had been flash frozen, as if it had happened in a matter of seconds, because it didn't look like he had reacted properly to freezing to death. And the police, when they came out, they would say, you know, this is odd. This is odd the way he's positioned. But ultimately, he died because he froze to death. And so there's no foul play here. And so no further investigation is needed. 5 years later, in 1926, a hunting party that included a young woman named Annie Lafferty was camping out along the Flat River inside of Headless Valley. And so that night, they're all kind of joking around the fire. And then at some point, they decide to all go to sleep. And then the next day, when everybody gets up, Annie is no longer in camp, and there's no sign of where she went. And so they begin by yelling out and walking around the immediate vicinity to see maybe if she stepped away for a minute, but
Dude, what the fuck is going on?
Annie's just gone, and no one knows where she went. And so the hunting party spends the rest of the day looking for Annie, but there's no sign of her. They ultimately leave the valley. They tell police. Police come out. There's this huge search, but Annie's never found. Several months later, a man named Charlie, who happened to have been out near Flat River, near this hunting party when they were out there, but Charlie himself was not in the hunting party. He didn't know Annie. He was just in the vicinity. He overheard someone talking about a member of that hunting party, specifically a woman, going missing. And when he heard that, he knew he had to tell police what he had seen that night out near Flat River. So he goes to police, and he explains that that night when he knew there was this hunting party over there, he could hear them, he knew they were over there. He said at some point he went to bed, and then he woke up when he heard the sound of rocks falling into the river in front of him. He was sleeping along the river's edge. So he sits up and he looks out across the river. It's totally dark, but there's some moonlight, and he's kind of looking around wondering what's causing the sound, but he can't see it, and then he hears it again, and he can tell it's off to his left. And these are not huge rocks. These are like medium to small size rocks, like rocks you could just pick up and throw. And so he's looking, and all of a sudden he sees, maybe a couple hundred yards away through some sparse trees, he sees a naked woman, a white naked woman, running on all fours up this mountainside. And as she's running up the mountainside, her feet and her hands are knocking little rocks into the river down below. She's right on the edge of this cliff. And as she's running up this hill, she stops and she turns, and he gets a good look at her face. And Charlie would say he was so taken aback by her face. It looked like she was possessed. There was something wrong with her face. And so Charlie instinctively ducked down and chose not to follow her, even though he knew anybody running naked anywhere in the wilds is doomed. But he felt like he could not go near this woman. There was something wrong with this woman. And so the police, they take this story down and they say, hey, you know, this is what Annie looked like. And Charlie would say, I mean, I think that's her. I think that matches her description. And so universally, it's believed this woman galloping up this hillside in the middle of the night naked was Annie. The police ultimately would not investigate Annie's disappearance any further because at the time Charlie was telling them this piece of information, she'd already been gone for months, and the assumption was she was dead. 4 years later, in 1931, another gold prospector decides to try their luck in Headless Valley. A man named Phil Powers. He makes his way into the valley. He finds a spot off of Flat River. He builds a cabin, and then shortly there.
Oh. Wonder what's going on with Charlie here.
Thereafter, his cabin burns to the ground with him inside of it. Now, his skeleton was intact, but the strange thing about his death is based on the origin of the fire, which would have been on the roof. He should have had an opportunity to climb out of the cabin before it burned down, giving rise to the theory that he was actually dead before the fire started. However, the police said this was an accident caused by Phil doing something with the stovepipe that led to it catching on fire, and this was just all one big accident. But the vast majority of people that have followed along to this point with all of these strange deaths, they were just not buying it. 5 years later, in 1936, two more gold prospectors, William Epler and Joseph Mulholland, they entered the Headless Valley to try their luck, and shortly after arriving and getting set up, they went missing. A search party came out to look for them, and they found their cabin, and just like Phil Powers, it had burned to the ground, but William and Joseph were not in the ashes. They were not anywhere nearby. In fact, they were never found. No one has any idea what happened to them, and no one knows what caused the fire. 9 years later, in 1945, yet another gold prospector named Ernest Sabbard entered the Headless Valley to go looking for gold, and then when he did not leave the valley for an intended rendezvous with some of his partners went looking for him, and they would find him inside of his sleeping bag, laying down, decapitated, right along the flat river inside of the Headless Valley. And so the police would come out, they would do an investigation, and they would call this an accident where, he starved to death or he died of hypothermia, and then after he was dead, animals must have come in and removed his skull, and that's why we can't find it. And so the police did not, at least not publicly, connect his death to all of the other decapitations in that small area. 1 year later, in 1946, another gold miner named John Patterson went into Headless Valley, and he went missing. And so a search party went in looking for him, and John would never be found. But on one of the last nights that the search party was in the Headless Valley, they were camping out near Flat River, some native tribes people came into their camp, and they warned them about some white figures that were walking around the valley that night. They're down near the river, they're out in the forest, they're kind of all around here, and so you really need to be careful. You don't want them to see you. And then these tribes people just left. And so the search party is absolutely horrified. They know about the rumors of this place. They're out here looking for someone that's gone missing in this place. And all night, all they hear are distant howls and screams that they hadn't heard in the previous nights. They're hearing these wailing sounds coming from all around them, like these things that are out there were intentionally trying to scare them to get them to leave. It felt like they were not supposed to be there. The next day, first thing when they got up and they left, the leader of that search party would say he just felt like the whole valley was totally sinister, and that constant wailing they heard the night before, he said he will never forget. From the mid-1940s onward, there have been far less strange incidents reported inside of Nahanni Valley, but one could attribute that to the fact that far less people have been going into Nahanni Valley ever since the 1940s. And in recent times, huge segments of the park have been permanently closed. The park has said the reason they're doing that is to protect that segment of the park. But other people have speculated that at least part of the reason why they're closing these segments, many of which are right near the Headless Valley, is because they're trying to protect people from getting anywhere near whatever it is that's lurking inside of that park. But regardless, it is still a fact that over the last century, there have been dozens and dozens and dozens of people that have either gone missing or who have died under very mysterious circumstances inside of this valley. And the truth is, nobody knows why. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found this...
There you go. Some type of skinwalker. Probably. God damn. That was a good story. Let's change it up a little. Hey, Anthony R. Nice for your show, boy. That was a good story. That was really good. And Mr. Ballin is fucking awesome. Do something else. Let's go animal related. Already did that one. That one. There you go. Let's change it up. I'm just gonna let the story play for itself. Hold on, here we go. Sorry. Oh, god damn it. Yeah. There you go. Called. Sorry, I wasn't I haven't been paying attention to the fucking chat. Sorry, Anthony R. Because I've been like really intrigued with all these videos. Next video. Man is dragged out of bed and devoured by a clan of hyenas. There you go.
Hyenas are amongst the most feared animals.
Those are, oh my god. Hyenas are like some of the most weird, like, animals out there. Because they're not dog related. I think they're like more of the, like, of the weasel family.
Animals in Africa.
And it's just crazy to me.
And despite being primarily known as scavengers, they are on the contrary highly skilled predators that are capable of utilizing their underrated intellect.
So more than likely, these hyenas, it should have been better described as opportunistic. That's what they are, hyenas.
And social skills to work in unison in order to take down prey much larger than themselves.
Look at those jaws.
Unfortunately, it's also a well-known fact that their prey items include humans, and this happens especially in rural areas of the regions they inhabit. And although hyenas typically fear and or avoid people in most circumstances, they have been known to attack and in many cases kill a number of vulnerable individuals, such as children, women, and frail men on an annual basis. The following video highlights one such incident, which saw the life of 87-year-old Tendai Maseka come to a gruesome end when he'd fall victim to a clan of spotted hyenas on November of 2020.
Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe is a landlocked country located in southern Africa. It has a diverse economy with agriculture, mining, and tourism being some of its main
One diamond.
industries. It's renowned for its production of tobacco, cotton, and maize, as well as its vast reserves of minerals such as gold, platinum, and diamonds. The country's topography is varied, with a mixture of highlands, plateaus, and lowlands. The eastern part of the country is dominated by the Eastern Highlands, which include the Nyanga Mountains, the Mvumba Mountains, and the Chimanimani Mountains. These highlands are covered in dense forests and offer spectacular views of valleys and waterfalls, while the central plateau is generally flat, with grasslands and savannas. And the famous Zambezi River forms the country's northern border and also includes the spectacular Victoria Falls.
Wow.
Home to several national parks, Zimbabwe is also famous for its diverse and abundant wildlife. The country hosts several large mammals, including elephants, lions, leopards, rhinoceroses, buffaloes, and of course, the spotted hyena. Hyenas
Woo! Have all of them. You have all of them here.
are known to inhabit various habitats in Zimbabwe, including savannas, woodlands, and rocky outcrops. In many rural areas, hyenas are viewed as a threat to livestock and people, and conflicts between humans and hyenas continue to occur in many of them. Hyenas are known to attack and kill livestock such as goats, sheep, and cattle, which in turn causes financial losses for these local farmers. However, hyenas also play an extremely important role in Zimbabwe's ecosystems. They're scavengers and help to clean up dead animal carcasses, which can reduce the risk of disease transmission, as well as maintain optimal health for their habitats.
I'm not carrying a zebra's fucking leg.
Additionally, hyenas are apex
I don't know why I'm laughing.
predators and help to control their habitats. Additionally, hyenas are apex predators and help to control populations of herbivores such as impalas and zebras, which can prevent overgrazing, which once again contributes to the overall balance of their habitats. Despite their significance to the ecosystems that they inhabit, however, these highly capable predators are also widely feared throughout the country. And out of the reported 60 human lives claimed by wild animals in Zimbabwe in 2020 alone, spotted hyenas are most certainly responsible for a decent percentage of them. On November 20th, 2020, Tendai Maseka, an 87-year-old man,
I really am terrible. That's JP.
had been drinking beer at a local bar before walking home alone in the dark. Since the COVID-19 pandemic had halted tourism in the area, life had become increasingly difficult financially, with money being scarce even by normal standards, which in comparison to, let's say, a Western country, is still earth and sky. The dry season had heightened tensions in the savannah between the wild animals, and reports of missing goats and cattle from farmers had been increasing. Tendai was
87 years
familiar with
old.
the cycle of competition for prey that occurred during the dry season, but this wasn't going to stop a man who was, according to reports, highly physically active for his age. Unbeknownst to Tendai, as he was walking home from the local bar, he was being followed by a clan of hyenas who were searching for food as the aforementioned dry season had emptied their territory of their usual prey. It's important to note that hyenas are well known for their opportunistic hunting tactics, which typically involve both stalking and scavenging. They're primarily nocturnal and use their keen sense of smell to locate potential prey. And once locked on, they will often follow their prey for long distances, while effectively using their low-slung bodies to stay hidden in the grass, and they will often approach from behind to avoid being seen, which is when they wait for the right moment to strike. Perhaps due to the few beers he had consumed, Tendai would forget to properly secure his mud hut door upon arriving home, and of course the hyenas who were stalking him this whole time would see this as an opportunity. Once he'd fallen asleep, the clever hyenas would then approach his home, lured by his scent, and would latch onto and drag the helpless 87-year-old man about 300 meters away from his hut before finally killing him. The next morning, a horrified neighbor would find Tendai's severed head near his hut, and an inspection of the area would reveal his arms and evidence of the hyena tracks. After following a trail of tracks, shredded clothing, and spots of blood for some time, the men would eventually arrive at the spot where the clan began devouring Tendai's body overnight, leaving scattered tracks, pieces of flesh, and scat throughout the scene. As the men followed the drag trail, they would observe that the hyena clan seemed to have been gnawing off Tendai's limbs from the bottom up as they dragged him away from his hut. Just after the discovery of Tendai's mutilated body, government hunters were immediately dispatched to eliminate the suspect clan of what was said to have consisted of approximately 6 hyenas in the area, which were said to have been a known clan that were attacking livestock. Mr. Tinashe Farawo, a spokesman for Zimparks, would the very next month confirm that 2 of the hyenas were indeed killed, with no updated reports indicating whether they were successful in capturing the remaining 4. Meanwhile, locals were urged to be vigilant and keep all doors and windows closed until the hyenas were captured. Farawa would also state that animal attacks were not uncommon during the summer, particularly during the drier months when food and water are scarcer than usual, and animals, knowing this, move long distances during this time in search of food. Farawa also mentioned that had they had enough resources, they would have translocated the animals from overpopulated areas to more remote regions instead of killing them. According to him, the root cause of these attacks is primarily due to the overpopulation of predators, which has been exacerbated by the impact of climate change on their habitats. All these factors combined, of course, increases the risk of more dangerous human-animal encounters. If you ever find yourself in hyena territory for whatever reason, it's best to take precautions when camping or hiking in areas where hyenas are known to live. First and foremost, it's important not to leave any food or garbage out in the open, as this can attract them. It's also recommended to camp in designated areas with proper fencing or barriers to keep hyenas out. If you do happen to encounter one, it's important to remain calm and avoid running away, as this, much like dogs, can trigger their hunting instinct. Instead, try to make yourself appear as large and intimidating as possible by raising your arms, shouting loudly, and banging pots or pans together to scare them off, just like you would a bear. If you do get attacked, it's important to fight back aggressively, targeting the head and the throat, as these are the hyena's most vulnerable areas. If this episode piqued your interest, then our previous episode about the actual...
Yeah, here's the cocaine bear story. I think I played it before. Wow. Hey, John Ryan. Nice for you to stop by. The cocaine bear ingested like about 70 about over 70 pounds of cocaine. Which is just fucking crazy. Let's see. What else? Play this one. This is called off of Mr. Ballin's channel. called what they find in this barn is nightmare fuel.
No matter
So this is gonna be another good one. Looks like a serial killer looking one. So get back into it. There's a gaggle of honey badgers.
whether you believe this tragedy is the
That's a shit ton of coke, 72 pounds.
result of something paranormal or something normal and rational and explainable, no matter which way you feel, or maybe somewhere in the middle,
I'm telling you, hyenas are the fucking bosses of the African safari. Low key.
the
Them and the Nile crocodiles. And the hippos.
details of the story itself, the actual facts of the story, are horrifying. What actually happened to this poor family in the 1920s it's just one of the more terrifying ordeals that I've ever come across, and it's crazy to me that it's a true story. Without giving too much away, someone or something shows up on this farm and it doesn't leave. One of the maids starts hearing strange sounds. They start looking for this person or this thing. They start seeing things moving around in their house, and there's every indication that someone is in the farm. Someone has snuck into the farm and is terrorizing us. And then on March 31st, 1922, whatever it was, finally attacks. This is the story of the Hinterkaifeck murders. Before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the dark, strange, and mysterious delivered in story format, well then my channel is the one for
Sounds good.
you. That is literally all I do on this channel, and I upload 3 to 4 times every week. So if that is of interest to you, I would ask you to gently 360 no-scope the like button, subscribe, and turn on all post notifications.
360
360 no-scope the like button, subscribe, and turn on all post notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's dive in. Back in the 1920s, there was a farmstead called Hinterkaifeck Farm that was located in southern Germany in a very rural, isolated, heavily forested area. So the occupants of the farm were the live-in maid and the Gruber family. The Gruber family was Andreas, his wife Azalea, their daughter Victoria, and Victoria's 2 children, Joseph and Azalea as well. And everything was going fine for the Gruber family and for their farm until the winter of 1921, when some very strange things started happening on their property. The first one to notice strange things happening around their property was their live-in maid. She spent the majority of her time in the main house, and she was alone a lot of the time. And she started to notice when she was alone that she would hear tapping, what sounded like in the walls. Not someone in another room tapping, but literally something in the walls. And she would go up and she would listen, and it would still be tapping, but she couldn't make sense of it. And then she started hearing a combination of disembodied voices and footsteps in the attic. And when she started hearing those footsteps and voices coming from the attic, she ran and told Andreas to say, hey, someone's in your attic. Andreas would go up. Even though he was skeptical, he'd go up to the attic and he would look, and not only is no one there, but it was this totally open space up there. There wasn't really anywhere to hide. There was no one up there, and there was no sign of anybody having been up there. There was no food, there was nothing. And so over the course of several weeks, the live-in maid kept saying that at night she'd be laying in bed and she would hear footsteps and voices from the attic. She'd hear tapping in the walls. She would tell Andreas, and then Andreas, he'd be frustrated with her because he didn't really believe her, and he'd go charging up into the attic and nothing would be there. And so she was just not having it. She'd been working with this family for a long time. She did not feel convinced that no one was there. She really thought this place was haunted. And so she ultimately tells the Gruber family, like, I'm sorry, but I can't stay here another night. Whenever I'm here, I feel like I'm being watched. And at night, I can't sleep because of the footsteps in the attic and these voices.
Holy
I know
shit!
you checked, but I can't be
God
here anymore.
damn it.
And so she quits. And it really catches the Gruber family by surprise.
That picture just scared the shit out of me just now. Fucking god damn it.
It's because they rely on her help. And so they're kind of thrown for a loop because they have to replace her. And so She leaves, and now they need to go find a replacement. Over the following 6 months, they would not find a replacement, and it would create an increased workload for basically everybody on the farm, which led to a higher stress level. Everybody's kind of on edge. You know, the departure of the live-in maid was a really big deal. And so you got to put that in perspective as you hear what happens over the next 6 months.
Exactly. Why do these things happen on a farm?
At first, after the live-in maid had left, no one reported hearing any strange sounds around the house. You know, they were so busy that they didn't even have time to consider if there was any sounds in the house that they didn't recognize. But eventually,
Because everyone knows that if they say something, it'll just sound like fucking crazy. Like they're fucking crazy, that's why.
Andreas would later admit that he started hearing the tapping sounds and the footsteps in the attic and the disembodied voices, and no one's there. And so now he's becoming paranoid, and he shared his paranoia with the rest of the family, who's now also hearing these sounds and these disembodied voices and the footsteps, and despite checking and now searching the whole property. Like, they've begun to actually do a full-blown investigation. Everyone's just stressed. They don't know what it's coming from. They're mad at each other for becoming paranoid. And so they just continue on with work and try to put it out of their mind that they're hearing these strange sounds. But the activity in the house would only intensify. What was initially just strange tapping sounds and what they thought were disembodied voices
I'm just a man.
turned into things going missing around the house.
Love you, brother.
Most notably, a set of their house
That's all love.
went missing. And there's only so many people there. There's really not a good answer as to why they might go missing. And they only have a couple sets. It's a big deal to lose a set of keys, and they went missing and they couldn't find them. Once the keys went missing, the family couldn't stop thinking about the strange sounds in their house and wondering if there really was someone hiding in their house. And it was terrifying. And then when young Azalea, one of the grandchildren, suddenly went missing one night, the whole family is in full panic. They go out looking everywhere for her. They're yelling in the forest. They can't find her. And then finally they find her, and she has no idea how she got out, where she went, and what even happened. She just was like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know how I got out. She was exhausted. She was confused. They brought her back to the house, and they're trying to get her to explain why you were doing that. She can't. They go back inside, and sitting on the table is a newspaper that Andreas didn't subscribe to. No one in the family had brought. No one even in the area, it would turn out, subscribed to this particular kind of obscure newspaper, and it's just sitting in their house. A couple days after that, they noticed that someone had clearly tried to break into their tool shed, which had loads of tools in there, very expensive. There was a lock on the outside, and there was very deep gashes into the metal. It looked like someone had been, hacking away at the lock to try to break it open. But, they're living in a very isolated part of Germany where there isn't much ambient sound. And so it was strange to them that someone had been so violent with this lock, hacking at this metal lock, presumably with something metal, and no one had heard it or reacted to it. None of the dogs had heard it, nothing. So just very confusing stuff is starting to happen around the property. But it would be what Andreas sees in the spring of 1922 that pushes he and his family over the edge from general paranoia to outright panic. So Andreas wakes up in early March of 1922. There was this huge snowstorm the night before. He gets up early and he goes to the back door of his house and he opens it up, and he can clearly see that there are footprints that have walked from the forest, which is pretty far away from his property. They have quite a bit of acreage. There's footsteps that are clearly coming out of the forest all the way up to the door that he has now just opened. And he's looking down at these footprints, and there's no return set of tracks. And so he's thinking to himself, well, whoever walked up to my house came into the house. So he shuts the door and locks it, and immediately goes and wakes up his family and says, hey, why are there footprints leading up to the back door? Because there's no footprints going away. Someone came to the back door and apparently came inside. His wife, his daughter, the grandkids, no one has a clue. The maid, nobody knows. They say, hey, we've been asleep. We have no idea. So now Andreas, he's obviously thinking about the strangeness that's happening.
Why are you not going around
the couple of months? And so he's worried.
I'll be grabbing a fucking shotgun, something, going around the fucking house, looking at every crevice under every bed, or something. Everything will be flipped upside down and being like, all right, where the fuck is this some bitch?
So he opens the door back up and he looks and he's studying these footprints and he's like, I just don't get it. You have to turn around and walk back. Otherwise you're here, you're at the house. He shuts the door and he walks around his house. He looks at all of the different exits to his house. So he looks to see if there's exiting footprints, which it's scaring him thinking about it, which means someone would have come into the house and jumped out a window or gone out another door, but he's just checking. And as soon as he makes sure there's no other footprints, he does a scan of his entire house. Because now he's convinced that someone's in his house. He goes to the attic. He goes all around. He's yelling. I mean, he's looking everywhere. There's nothing. There's no one in the house. The family's concerned, but there's no one in the house. So he keeps everything locked, and he goes outside and he starts tracking these footprints back to where they came from. And he walks all the way to the forest, and they just kind of stop abruptly. Like they just started kind of magically at the edge of the tree line and walked right up to his house, but there's no clear origination besides it's just in the forest somewhere. And there's also no clear sense of what happened once they arrived at the door. So after doing one more loop around his property, he goes in the barn, he goes in the shed, he goes back in his house, he's checking the attic, he's looking everywhere, and he can't find any indication that some stranger is here. He finally decides that he's going to tell someone about what's been happening at his property. And so they did have a neighbor, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, who was his closest neighbor, who was not really that close, but a couple hundred yards away. And he goes over and he tells Lorenz everything. I've been hearing sounds. My maid quit because she was hearing sounds. We looked in the attic. We couldn't find anything. Then we started hearing sounds. The keys go missing. There's this newspaper in my house. My granddaughter's running out in the middle of the night. She's disappearing. She doesn't know what's going on. These footprints. I can't make sense of it. And so Lorenz, also not knowing what to make of it, suggests like, hey, I have extra weapons. You want to take an extra rifle and arm yourself, protect yourself? And Andreas just says, you know what? No, I'm good. I'm going to pass on the rifle. I'm probably overreacting anyways, and I'm sure we're just fine. But it would turn out he was not just fine, and he probably should have taken up Lorenz on the offer. So just a couple of days after...
Exactly. This set the place on fire, then this see what happens, and then he'll be... Yeah.
Speaking with his neighbor about the weirdness happening on his property, the Gruber family got a little bit of good news, which was they finally were able to locate another maid, a live-in maid, to come stay with them to replace the one who had left because she believed the place was haunted.
Wait, come back. A living maid. Was the other one dead? Hello?
The good news, which was they finally were able to locate another maid, a live-in maid, to come stay with them to replace the one who left because she believed the place was haunted.
Live-in maid.
So a few weeks later, on March 31st, 1920...
Live-in maid. There it is. Sorry. My stupid self was living.
22, this new maid shows up to Hinterkaifeck, but unfortunately, this would also be the same date a horrible tragedy unfolds at the Hinterkaifeck farm. Over the course of 24 hours...
It's from what it seems like, it's close... Jesus Christ, I just paused it at the right time. It's somewhere in... it's in the southern part of Germany, outside of, close to Munich. If that makes it. Yeah, so it's in the very, not the very southern, but it's the southern central part of Germany where this farm is located.
Someone or something was in the barn on Hinterkaifeck and was able to silently lure in members of the Gruber family one by one. Without telling anybody else what they were doing, they would walk over, almost like in a trance, into the barn, where they would be struck in the head by something called a mattock, which is kind of like an axe. Blow to the head, and they're down. As soon as they're down, whoever was in there, whatever was in there, would take their bodies and move them.
Oh, it's definitely a weird thing now. A live-in maid.
To the corner and lay them down, kind of square them up against the corner of the barn, and then cover them with hay. And as soon as they were deceased, he would go, whatever it was, would go back and lure in the next person. So over a whole day, each of these members of the family were being lured into this barn where investigators Nobody knows what it was that was luring them in. They weren't scared when they went in. Their guard was down, and they go in, and then they put their head with this mattock until there was 4 people stacked up in the corner. And at that point, the remaining 2 people on the farm were still in the house sleeping, and whoever was doing this went into the house and used the mattock to end their lives as well. 4 days later, on April 4th, a repairman who was scheduled to come to the Hinterkaifeck farm shows up to repair the feeding machine. He goes to the door, he knocks on the door, and it's locked, and you can see lights on inside. He can hear the dog barking inside, but no one comes to greet him. Now, the feeder was outside of the main house, and it was actually on basically a public area of the farm, so he didn't need them to physically get to the feeder, and he knew how to fix it. So after trying the front door, going to the back door, looking in the windows and seeing lights, hearing the dog, but everything's locked, he just said, you know what, I'm just gonna do the job. So he goes into the area where the feeder is. He does the repair, and as he's leaving, he notices that the dog that was barking, that was inside the house, is now outside the house tied up. And so he goes over to that section.
The fuck? Inside and is now outside tied up. What the fuck is happening?
Of the house, thinking, oh well, now I'll knock on the door. Someone's sure to see me. And again, no one comes to the door. And the back door, that clearly must have just been opened to let the dog out, is locked again. And so he's like, man, that's odd. And so instead of just leaving, he finishes the job with the feeder, and he goes over to Lorenz Schlittenbauer's house, the neighbor, and he says, hey, just so you know, I was just over at the Gruber family's farm. I fixed their feeder like they wanted me to, but no one was there, but maybe somebody was there because the dog was inside, then it was outside. Don't know what's going on, but can you just let them know that I was here because I couldn't get in touch with them. But it prompts Schlittenbauer to go check on the Grubers because they haven't seen him in a couple days anyways, and so they figure they'll swing by and just make sure everything's okay. So they go over to Hinterkaifeck, and the lights are on in the house. The dog, sure enough, is outside. The doors are locked, and they see that the barn is actually open. So they go over to the barn, and in the barn, at first they don't see anything, but in the back corner, underneath some hay, are 4 of the bodies of the Gruber family. They go inside and they find the remaining 2 bodies, and no one else is there. Although there was signs of someone recently eating in the kitchen. The fire was lit, it was like the house was being lived in at that very moment. Although to Schlittenbauer and anybody that was there, they have no way of knowing that it's been days since the Gruber family had passed away. And so they end up leaving and getting in touch with authorities. So the police show up and they're able to determine with relative certainty that the tragedy took place on March 31st. But for 4 days afterwards, someone lived in the Gruber house, slept in their beds, ate their food, lit fires, lounged around inside. They played with the dog. They milked the cows. I mean, they lived in this house. They ran the farm for 4 days. And other neighbors would even say that, yeah, we saw smoke coming out of the chimney on, April 3rd and April 2nd. And so it was confirmed that someone had been staying in this house, which is so creepy. And so the police are a little bit baffled, and they're like, okay, well then it was probably a drifter. Target of opportunity, they probably saw this isolated farm, and they probably were gonna rob them, stay there a little bit, and then leave. But when they searched the farmhouse, there were large sums of cash that were just out practically in the open, barely hidden, that had not been taken. And anybody that was robbing the place would have taken the cash. And so probably wasn't a robbery, which leaves maybe a crime of passion, but they were like, what's the motive? And unfortunately, Andreas was not particularly well liked in the town that was nearby. And so there was lots of people that didn't like Andreas, which made it really hard to whittle it down. So they started just interviewing like crazy. They're talking to hundreds of people that were in connection with, that could be connected to this, but they're getting nowhere. They did feel like Lorenz Schlittenbauer was probably the best suspect, because he's right there, he's right next door, he's their neighbor, and in fact he had wanted to marry Victoria, the daughter, and Andreas had told him outright no, and they thought that could be a reason. But the big issue with Lorenz Schlittenbauer being the primary suspect is, he had a farm to keep and a family to take care of, and so how could he have committed this crime and then ran the Hinterkaifeck farm for 4 days and lived there and slept there without his family knowing? And his family's like, no, he's been here with us. And so the police, they aren't able to solve it. They don't really have any decent suspects, and so they kind of leave it with, well, whoever did this probably had been there for about 6 months, potentially, before they
Don't tell me it was one of the maids.
committed the crime, and then stayed there for a few days afterwards, and then vanished. And to this day, they have not been caught. And they even reopened this case in 2007. But they found that, despite the number of suspects and despite the evidence available, it just wasn't enough to provide any sort of clarity on what actually happened. So it remains a huge mystery. So like any other high-profile unsolved mystery, there are literally hundreds of potential explanations for what could have happened. But what I'm most interested in is what you all think could have happened. I will do my best to look through your comments, and I'll respond to the ones that...
I really think one of the maids did. Honestly. That's my opinion. So, of that story. That's crazy. Yeah, I'm saying. I'm telling you. One of the maids. It's one of the maids. So, I'm going to watch this one. This woman was devoured by a bear in front of her family.
As Ray Kitchen, a 56-year-old trucker from Fort Nelson, BC, delivered his final load of explosives to seismic crews working on the Alaska Highway, he decided to take a break at Liard River Hot Springs Provincial Park with his 11-year-old daughter Jolene and her friend Sarah. The park is located in the Boreal Forest and is a popular tourist spot featuring campsites, breathtaking scenery, as well as a famous children's playground. It was August 14th of 1997.
It was Lorne. It was Lorne. It was Lorne that killed him.
And Kitchen was looking forward to a day of relaxation where he could sit back and watch his girl swim. After having just spent mere minutes in the water, the peaceful ambience was suddenly shattered by ear-piercing screams coming from the Hanging Gardens, another one of the many famous attractions at the park. Kitchen sprang into action upon hearing this and ran along a slick boardwalk, climbing wooden stairs to the viewing platform, which is when he was met with a horrific scene. A massive black bear was mauling a young boy and a motionless woman, both covered in blood from deep wounds. What happens next would go down as one of the most tragic, yet heroic true tales in North American history. This is a true story of the Liard Springs tragedy of 1997.
Here we go.
After a long and exhausting journey from Paris, Texas, Patty McConnell and her two children, Kelly and Kristen, were relieved to arrive at Liard River Park. Eager to unwind, they quickly changed into their swimsuits and made their way to the lower pool. The water was warm and inviting, and they enjoyed a relaxing soak before deciding to venture into the more secluded upper pool. However, Kristen would quickly grow restless, which is when she would dash back to the lower pool to play with some newfound friends. Concerned for her safety, McConnell and Kelly would follow Kristen. As they approached the Hanging Gardens, Kelly suggested a better vantage point, and so the pair climbed a flight of steps to a viewing platform. Momentarily lost in the beauty of the myriad of exotic plants that the park hosted, the pair are unaware of the rustling bushes beside the boardwalk. As McConnell descended the wet steps, her attention was quickly drawn to something else. She locked eyes with a big adult male black bear sitting in the shrubbery, chewing on a dogwood branch. Stunned, McConnell whispered urgently to her son, "Kelly, bear." Kelly, however, thought she was joking and turned around only to come face to face with a towering black bear. Realizing the potential danger, he cautioned his mother not to make any sudden movements. Kelly then slowly begins moving closer to McConnell, which is when the bear suddenly snorted and lunged through the railing onto the boardwalk, prompting Kelly to yell in a panic, "Mom, run!" McConnell would then sprint back up the stairs to the viewing platform, but the bear was fast approaching. And just moments later, Kelly watched in horror as the bear grabbed his mother in between its mighty jaws. Despite his scrawny frame, Kelly then courageously attacked the bear and kicked
Dude, that would be horrible.
Kelly watched in horror as the bear grabbed his mother in between its mighty jaws. Despite his scrawny frame, Kelly then courageously attacked the bear and kicked it in the face, shouting at it to get off his mother in the process. The relentless ursine grunted and returned to McConnell, not paying any attention to Kelly, who cleverly took advantage of this by searching for a weapon. Fueled by rage and surging with adrenaline, Kelly then grabbed a sawed-off tree limb and began repeatedly swinging it at
Being eaten live by a fucking omnivore is the worst possible case scenario. Like, especially bear-wise. Because all they're going to do is just hold you down by their paw and this rip flesh. Just rip you apart as you're alive. While you're screaming, they enjoy it. They'll just... and just keep going. Just
the bear's head,
continue to go to town on you.
while simultaneously screaming for help at the top of his lungs. Just as he'd catch a glimpse of his mother's blood on the bear's teeth, a now further enraged Kelly would then manage to land a powerful strike.
Yeah, bears, chimps, gorillas. Worst things to get ripped to shreds by.
Directly on the bear's nose,
And polar bears. And black bears.
causing it to growl and lash out at him with its powerful paws,
Tell
leaving
you.
deep claw marks on
See?
his neck and shoulders. The bear then turned its full attention to Kelly, overpowering him with its weight and biting down on his waist, which is when it proceeded to swing him around in the air as if he were a toy. It was at this point that Kelly felt himself losing consciousness as the bear flung him onto the deck with force, leaving him in a ball beside his motionless mother. As a now severely injured Kelly desperately attempts to crawl towards Patty, the determined bear would attack again and tear at Kelly's flesh with its teeth, causing him to scream.
Exactly. Rage-filled version. I like it. I'm a dual threat.
In pain as he simultaneously controlled his urge to vomit from the rancid stench of its breath.
Jesus.
Kelly at this point
Jesus. Oh my god. That'll be the worst. Like getting smelling. Oh my god. Bear breath. Bear breath would be the worst breath. Oh. Especially if it is a carnivore bear that ate something meaty beforehand. Because all your... God damn it. Gas pressure. All you're gonna smell is like rotten flesh, meat. Fuck. Oh. Ugh.
tear at Kelly's flesh with its teeth, causing him to scream in pain as he simultaneously controlled his urge to vomit from the rancid stench of its breath.
Yeah.
Kelly at this point knew that death was near, which is when he would close his eyes and wait for the inevitable. This is when aforementioned Ray Kitchen arrives at the scene. He would react to the situation quickly and picked up a fallen tree branch and proceeded to pound it against the railing, shouting, "Hey, get off!" When the bear ignored him, Kitchen would then grab a larger branch and shove it into the animal's stomach, hoping to push it away from Kelly. The bear would then divert its full attention towards Kitchen and charged at him, knocking him through the railing and into the bushes. Kitchen protected himself from the bear's claws by scrambling on his knees to a nearby tree and covering his head with his hands. He would then scream for help. Hearing the commotion, 71-year-old Frank Headingham rushed towards the scene. Ingrid Bailey, a wilderness firefighter and paramedic from Felton, California, and her friend Brad Westervelt were already on the boardwalk ahead of him. They had heard the cries of "Help! Bear!" and "Get a gun!" and so were headed towards the parking lot along with the other panicked people. Bailey, along with Westervelt and Headingham, were accustomed to encountering bears, and so didn't let fear stop them as they grabbed sticks and chunks of wood and headed towards the scene. As they arrived at the viewing platform, they would see two bloodied bodies lying on the deck. Below them, the bear had Kitchen in its grip, with its jaws locked around his arm and shoulder, and its claws tearing into his flesh. Bailey then hurled chunks of wood at the bear, screaming for it to release Kitchen, but her efforts too were in vain. Headingham and Westervelt would see a thick tree trunk nearby and attempt to use it as a battering ram, but even their combined efforts couldn't drive the persistent bear away. Bailey realized that they needed a gun and would then begin wondering where the park ranger was. Westervelt would decide to go find the ranger while Hedingham, though exhausted and with a history of heart attacks, which of course didn't do him any favors given the stressful circumstances, would continue to fight the bear. It's at this point that suddenly, the bear would shift its position and begin attacking Kitchen once again, and land its final blow, tossing him into the air violently, killing him instantly. As this was happening, Bailey tended to McConnell, checking for her pulse and attempting to resuscitate her, despite knowing she was likely not coming back. Meanwhile, Hedingham went to Kelly, who had just regained consciousness and was still trying to reach his mother. As they were tending to Kelly, the massive black bear would then once again appear on the deck near them. An enraged Hedingham then kicks the bear with his hiking boots, causing it to stumble back. However, instead of fleeing, the animal moved towards the boardwalk, where other people were still present. Kelly then begged Hedingham to help his mother, to which Hedingham replied to him not to move and to breathe slowly, assuring him that they were doing everything that they could. Hedingham, who had knowledge of first aid, used his handkerchief from his jacket to clean up the worst of Kelly's wounds. Just as Bailey realized that they needed towels to act as compresses and more helping hands to assist with CPR, a group of several men would rush up the stairs just in the nick of time, with one having a towel as well as knowledge of CPR. Hedingham and the man with the towel would then help to bind Kelly's wounds, while another man assisted Bailey in compressing McConnell's chest as she attempted mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. By this time the bear had already left, but Bailey still couldn't help but wonder where the ranger was. Hedingham then exclaimed that they needed to get the victims to the hospital, which is when he would leave to get some help. A man named Vandervelden, who was a research assistant from the University of Calgary, had been soaking in the upper pool. He'd rushed down to the boardwalk with some other bathers to see what was happening upon being alerted by all the commotion. It was at this point that someone shouts, "A bear's coming! Run for your lives!" As everyone fled, Vandervelden slipped and tumbled into the bushes, where the bear pounced on him and began to viciously maul him. Despite kicking and pulling at the animal's nose and ears, the bear would just not relent, and Vanderveld felt excruciating pain as its claws and teeth tore into his flesh, leaving deep wounds. Hedingham finally arrives at the park ranger's office, where he'd recount the situation to Ranger Dave Webb, who quickly retrieved 2 rifles, a Winchester 30-30 and a Remington 223 from his motorhome. Accompanied by a young man named Dwayne Eggbroten, who he'd asked if he knew how to use a gun, the trio then rushed to the scene. Eggbroten arrived first and heard moans from below the boardwalk where the bear had dragged Vandervelden and was now feeding on him. Taking aim at the back of the bear's neck, Eggbroten would fire a perfect shot, causing the bear to collapse, and although he knew that the shot was fatal, he regardless of this fired 2 more shots to ensure its demise. Back on the viewing platform, Bailey was still attending to McConnell and her son when she'd heard the shots. Her pent-up tension and anger finally released as she cried out, "Shoot it again." It was at this point that the tragedy at Liard River Hot Springs had finally come to an end. Although Patty McConnell died that afternoon, Kelly McConnell and Ari Vandervelden would survive thanks to the heroic acts of Ray Kitchen, Ingrid Bailey, Frank Hedingham, and the others. They were flown to a hospital and would eventually
Wow, that's fucking crazy.
recover from their severe injuries. More than 500 mourners attended the honoring of Ray Kitchen's bravery in Fort Nelson on August 22, 1997. In a letter to Kitchen's wife, U.S. President Bill Clinton wrote, "The heroism and selflessness that your husband displayed coming to the aid of Patty and Kelly McConnell is an example of all that is noble and good in human nature." Ray Kitchen would posthumously receive the Star of Courage from Canada in September of 1998, and Frank Hedingham, Kelly McConnell, Ingrid Bailey, and Brad Westervelt were also awarded decorations for their display of bravery. If this episode piqued your interest, then our previous episode about a man whose life was tragically taken by
Wow. That was wild. I have one more video from the night. God damn. Sound like a bear that rage. Yeah. Jesus. I have one more for us tonight. Depends. I think I have one. Actually, I have a couple more. 2 more. Depends. Please go. Yeah, I have 2 more after this one. You'll get through it. All right. So, so next video is a marathon video. Not a video. It's a true story. Marathon true stories, but it's of the big cats. So tigers, lions, leopards, jags, all them big cats, mountain lions. So yeah, we're gonna hop into these.
The following video features the deadliest big cat attacks that I've covered on the channel thus far. I put together this collection last night featuring the most notorious tiger attack, one of the most brutal mountain lion attacks of all time, as well as the ongoing crisis of man-eating lions in Tanzania, and much more. Welcome to When Animals Attack.
Great YouTube channel. He has a bunch of other animal stories and marathons. Him, and Final Affliction that I played earlier. And Mr. Ballin. Favorite channels of all time. Outside of Lorne, these three that I'm playing right now, for like nature wise and stuff, best. Oh yeah, and also fun fact: tigers in the Sundarbans of India have been hunting humans and have killed humans. I think the tigers of the Sundarbans in India have killed about 300,000, if I remember correctly. 300,000. I want to say 200,000 humans in 200 years, if I remember correctly, from what I've heard. From Joe Rogan's podcast. It's like in 200 years, within 200 years in the Sundarbans, like tigers have killed, I think, up to 200 or to 300 humans in that general area that is called the Sundarbans. It's like 200 to 300,000 humans that they've actively hunted humans.
Deep in the heart of the remote Indo-Nepalese wilderness, a beast prowled the shadows in a menacing hegemony of 7 years, stalking its prey with deadly precision and claiming 436 lives. The Champawat tigress stands as the only feline ever recorded to have killed over 400 humans in a single spree.
Exactly, Anthony. They can kiss my fucking ass.
Of violence, weaving a constantly
God damn, those eyes of the fucking tigers and any feline, those eyes are fucking sociopath eyes. Those are the crazy eyes.
embedded folklore that would infuse terror into the hearts of many, a fear that would be passed down for
God damn, I love tigers.
generations.
Oh yeah, another fun fact. There's more tigers in Texas and privately owned like collections in Texas than there are in the wild.
To come.
I'm just gonna leave it at that.
In the early 1900s, the South Asian region was beset by a terror unlike any other, as a plague of tiger attacks struck India and Nepal with particular ferocity. These majestic big cats, specifically the Bengal tigers, would stalk people in isolated villages, seeking out lone travelers, farmers, and especially groups of women and children to prey upon. They would appear in the form of streaks, emerging from the dense wood with a huff and a puff, ambushing their victims and then disappearing into the dark jungles once more, whilst dragging their kills with them. The Champawat tigress had an astonishingly long 7-year rampage, which can only be explained by the lack of her usual prey, large herbivores such as elk and deer. It was thought that this absence of her usual prey items may have driven her to hunt humans instead.
Isn't that a type of pig? Javelinas? I believe that's a type of pig, if I remember. Yeah. Oh, Jesus.
In the 1900s, the now widely feared Champawat tigress hunted humans with what villagers would describe as an unquenchable thirst, brutally killing and
See,
consuming.
look at those fucking eyes. Even as the most realistic eyes of a feline. God damn.
As an unquenchable thirst. Tigress hunted humans with what villagers would describe as an unquenchable thirst, brutally killing and consuming over 200 victims in just a few short years. Her name would invoke fear wherever it was mentioned, and terror would seem to reverberate through the air whenever it would be. The
Dude, those Bengal tigers, fuck
Bengal
off.
tiger is a formidable creature, boasting a bite force of over 1,000.
Dude, they would murder the I will tell you right now, Bengal tigers would murder the shit out of lions.
50 pounds. That's all.
Lions are packed. These tigers are fucking solitude. So, like, in a one-on-one combat, I would go with a tiger over a lion. I'm just being straight up.
They also have the Bengal tiger is a formidable. Her name would invoke
See, look at those
fear
fucking
wherever
eyes.
it was mentioned, and terror would seem to reverberate through the air whenever it would be. The Bengal tiger is a formidable creature, boasting a bite force of over 1,050 pounds. That's almost double of that of an adult lion.
Yeah, see? Like, they would just fucking destroy the lion.
Not only are their canines the sharpest in the cat family and capable of tearing through steel, they also have incredible speed and are able to run up to a blazing 40 miles per hour when in pursuit of prey. And what is perhaps the most chilling of all is their reputation for exacting revenge after years of simmering resentment.
That is so true.
A perfect example of this would be the story covered in depth in a previous episode detailing a gruesome account.
Yes, there is a story of that, and if I have time, I will play that story.
Of a tiger's revenge against the poacher. I will leave the link in the end screen.
Like, this tiger killed all this guy's dogs, and then ended up eating, like, killing this guy later on. Like, after it shot him, like, after this hunter shot this tiger, and this tiger survived, and then, like, this hunter went after it again, and it recognized him, and then, like, this hunter, like, I think it shot it again and it survived or something. I don't fucking know. I just know, like, this tiger hunted this hunter and this, like, killed all of his dogs beforehand and, like, waited perfectly for this guy. Like this tiger hid up in a tree outside of his house in Siberia. So it was a Siberian tiger. And Like, waited up in the street and then, like, obliterated this guy.
For you. Please do note that it is age restricted and is a video that this platform does not deem appropriate for viewers of all ages. So viewer discretion is advised for that particular video. Even the soldiers at this point, trained and experienced in encounters with a variety of dangerous South Indian wildlife, found themselves outmatched by the Champawat's ferocity. The master of ambush would attack them without warning, of course when they'd least expect it, with the last thing many of its victims seeing being its claws and teeth flashing in the moonlight. With fatalities on the rise, the Nepalese authorities were forced to abandon their attempts to capture or kill the Champawat, and would thus implement a change in strategy. They would turn their
Chipawa! Hey, Chipawa! Love it!
efforts towards pushing the tigress deeper into the forest, towards the Indian border, in hopes that she would find new hunting grounds and leave the villagers in peace. The soldiers,
They're so fucking big. Fucking tigers.
along with local volunteers and poachers, would split into several groups and launch an assault on the Champawat beast, forcing it to retreat into Indian territory across a river named Sarda. This successful collaborative effort from the soldiers would bring an end to the tigress's extended period of causing upheaval and bloodshed.
God damn, they're so gorgeous. Tigers.
At least in Nepal,
They're so gorgeous, but so deadly.
which lasted a grueling 4 long years. After being forced out of Nepal, the tigress would eventually appear in Champawat, a small town
One of the felines, tigers are like Bengals and Siberian tigers. Favorite.
nestled in the North
of
Indian
the
region
felines.
of Kumaon, in the state of Uttarakhand, where the gruesome ambushing and mass killing of locals by the tigress would continue to terrorize the community, and that too in dramatic fashion. As the killings continued unabated, the villagers of Champawat were left cowering in fear, barricaded within their homes as they waited for the arrival of the man who was thought to be the only one capable of putting an end to her rampage, Sir Edward James Corbett, a former army officer and seasoned hunter summoned by the British government of Uttarakhand, would get word of the man-eating beast.
It's Lorne!
An avid naturalist with extensive experience of hunting tigers throughout India, Corbett was well versed in the habits and behaviors of these majestic animals, but even he, after hearing the accounts of the Champawat tigress, had never recalled facing a challenge quite like this one where a man-eating feline that locals refer to as shaitan in Hindi, which translates to devil, or Satan in English, that has seemingly shook a whole nation, a nation which till today harbors the second largest number of humans in the world. It's a cold afternoon in 1907, the 7th year of the man-eater's reign of terror in Kumaon. A group of women from the nearby village of Pali set out on a mission to gather firewood and leaves for their households and livestock, armed with branch spears and verdant-collecting baskets. As they traverse the treacherous muddy pathways, the women come upon a ravine filled with tall, ominous-looking cedar trees. The post-rainy weather is chilly, yet invigorating, and the clouds are still clearing the air of humidity. As the women gather their items from the cedar and eucalyptus trees, little do they know that they're being stalked. 16-year-old Premika Devi sits atop a thick branch, with a delicate stiletto slicer in hand and a golden foliage crate placed before her. Unbeknownst to her, however, the stealthy Champawat tigress has its sights locked on her and is getting in position for an ambush. And in the blink of an eye, the mighty big cat swiftly weaves through some thick, grassy patches, lowering her head into position to strike, her subtle footsteps silenced by the howling wind and the women's chatter. The tension then builds to a climax when the tigress reaches just a few feet away from the thicket where Premika was sitting, and gets in position to strike. The tiger lunges at Premika from behind, with deadly precision. The gasps and screams of the women are overpowered by the tigress's fearsome, vengeful grunts that pierce the air like a hot knife through butter, sending tremors down the spines of her friends as they looked on helplessly in a state of pure shock and horror. Premika lets out a loud scream as she frantically slides down the tree, desperately trying to haul herself back to the branch and escape the tigress. But it was clear that she stood no chance against the deadly predator, as her incredible speed and agility would display itself, and in an instant, the 500-pound Bengal tigress unleashes a powerful swipe with its mighty paw, which would make contact with Premika's slender body, knocking her to the ground with force, at which point the tigress proceeds to savage her face, biting into and breaking her jaws with its powerful teeth before the eyes of her horrified friends. The women, who were perched up on tree branches, meanwhile scream, holler, and shriek while hurling stones at the tigress, causing her to pause for a moment and snarl at the group, warning them with a fearsome growl to stay away from its prey. And it's at this point that the tigress decides to deliver her notorious final blow, and swiftly bites into the vertebrae located between Premika's neck and spine, and ends her life with a powerful jerk of its head. And while letting out a final desperate shriek, Premika falls silent, and the Champawat man-eater claims what was now her 435th victim. As she dragged Premika's lifeless body through the dense woodlands, her horrified friends would then run back to their homes as fast as they could, traumatically sobbing and screaming in horror all the way.
Jesus.
Just days after Premika's death, aforementioned hunter Jim Corbett is finally faced with the mighty task of hunting down the mighty Champawat tigress. Armed with his trusty rifle, he arrives at the scene of Premika's attack as per the directions given to him by her friends, and thus begins to follow her trail of blood through the dark forest. Hours into the search, he finally comes across a few remains of Premika. It was her hand, which had been still attached to its radial bone, with shreds of flesh still loosely hanging off of it. Despite the unfavorable visibility due to the darkness of the forest, a determined Corbett, regardless of this, decides to continue the search for Premika's body by his lonesome. And so, after yet another few hours of searching, well into the middle of the night, he finally manages to locate the torn and heavily mutilated carcass of Premika, with bits of flesh residue still covering her face, which had an expression of having witnessed unimaginable terror etched onto it, while the rest of the body had for the most part been consumed. After a quick analysis of the situation and his findings, Corbett, with his years of experience in the jungle, knows that the tigress is likely still lurking nearby. And as if he were psychic, this is precisely when he hears some movement in the darkness behind some nearby brush. As he quickly turns around with his rifle at the ready, just a few seconds later, Corbett comes face to face with the unwavering gaze of the Bengal tigress as she emerges out of the brush and makes her way towards him without displaying a hint of fear. Realizing that not only does this tiger not fear an armed hunter, but is blatantly sizing him up as prey, Corbett then raises his rifle, takes aim, and fires a round at her. The agile tigress reacts swiftly and jumps out of harm's way, dodging the bullet, and thus runs off into the darkness before Corbett could get another shot. At this point, Corbett realizes that this was unlike any other tiger he'd ever hunted, that what he was dealing with was more than just an apex predator. It was a creature driven by a deep and insatiable hunger for man. In other words, there was no doubt in his mind that the Champawat tigress was at this point strictly a man-eater. Determined to take it down, Corbett would then return to his camp and devise a much stronger plan. With the dawn of the next day bringing forth news of yet another killing by the man-eater in the village of Pali, Corbett then calls upon a group of volunteers and leads a charge to confront the tigress during the day. The strategy was to drive the tigress out of the dense Champawat woods and into a clearing where he would take her down with a precision shot. And so the experienced big game hunter manages to gather 300 volunteers, and armed with drums, pots, and other noise-making instruments, he would lead them atop a small hill overlooking the dense Champawat forest into a particular region where the tigress was believed to be hiding. Corbett then heads the command as the men commence a charge towards the tiger's territory, as they simultaneously shout and bang on the drums, announcing their presence with a deafening racket that in just seconds forces the otherwise much more stealthy tigress to present herself as she leaps out of some thick brush and runs straight towards the clearing, just as Corbett had anticipated. With the tigress in range, Corbett, who was also accompanied by a local police sheriff, successfully manages to hit the tiger with 2 shots, one which struck her face and the other in the abdomen. But to his surprise, the mighty tigress still wouldn't go down, at which point she charges Corbett. With not enough time to reload, and with his life flashing before his eyes, the raging tigress would get just meters away from Corbett when, to his good fortune, the aforementioned local police sheriff fires a shot, hits the tigress in the left foot just 20 meters away from him. This was the only time that the resilient tigress would finally display any hint of having given up, and the man-eater of Champawat, after its estimated 436th kill, would finally be slain. The investigation of the tigress's body later revealed that she had a broken upper left canine, which had likely been the result of an unsuccessful poaching attempt. They would go on to reach the conclusion that it was this very injury that not just impacted her ability to hunt her typical prey, but would ignite from within her what is now believed to be a seemingly common response from her kind, one that's fueled by vengeance.
That's crazy. All right, another one. Well, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I have 2 more left, and then I'm going to be done for the night. This one.
In this episode,
Shark bites off a head off of a dude. Ugh.
a trio of free divers decide to dive for abalone off the coast of California. Little did they know, their friend fishing on the boat above them was about to attract a man-eating great white shark. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This
Right. Yes, we should all do that in Cornville. This all 300 of us. This start begging, this begging pots, pans, whatever the fuck we want, and just drive Lorne away from Cornville.
is the terrifying shark attack on Randall Fry, who tragically had his head bitten off by the massive beast. Welcome to Final Affliction. Cruising in the depths of the world's oceans are sharks that have earned themselves
Great white.
a reputation as the
Nice Bruce. Freeze your fridge, not food.
most dangerous species of sharks, the great white sharks. They are equipped with rows of razor-sharp teeth that are unforgiving
damn.
during their infamous
Those shark eyes.
sneak attacks.
Beautiful. Look at that. Right. Fucking. Oh my god, that's a great attack. On a seal. That's a classic. This is a classic great white attempt. Like, great white attack on a seal. Underneath, straight up, full fucking speed right ahead and leaping all out of the water.
Razor-sharp teeth that are unforgiving during their infamous sneak attacks.
Boom!
When great white sharks are looking to
Fuck.
satisfy their large appetites, the last thing you want to do is be
Look at that. Bro.
in their way. When these ruthless sea creatures decide to strike, they move with such precision and
Yeah, right underneath. Coming full
these
speed
ruthless
ahead.
sea creatures decide to strike.
Straight up.
They move with
Look at that. That's a right there. That's a classic great white attempt. Full speed ahead, coming straight up from underneath. Oh my
such
god.
precision and speed that they end up giving their victims
Look at
no
that.
chance to react.
God damn, look at that. Oh man. It's like 10 feet out of the water. Jesus. God damn, look at that. Look at that picture right there. That's, oh.
Giving their victims no chance to react. Onlookers are
10
left
feet. 10 feet right out of the water.
with no other choice than to watch in horror. Such was the case of a man named Randall Fry. A 50-year-old father of one, was an ocean enthusiast who loved to spend every waking moment in the expansive oceans. He was fascinated by sea life and captivated by the power of the ocean. The ocean was not only a place for him to fulfill his diving and sport fishing hobbies, but also the foundation of his entire career. It was his life. So on 15th of August 2004, same as any other suitable day, Randall could not resist the urge to go to the ocean. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon, and the sea was calm and breathing with cadence. While seated at a seaside restaurant, Randall watched as the waves crawled gently toward the shore. The murmuring of the waves as they made their way to the beach was hypnotic. He felt as if the sea was calling to him, and so, together with his longtime diving buddies, Cliff Zimmerman and Red Bartley, he heeded the call, and they all set out to the Mendocino coast of abalone. The three had made it their afternoon mission to catch some abalone, a type of marine snail that was common in the area. Aboard the 28-foot fishing boat named Dolphin, the trio was bursting with excitement as the cool ocean breeze brushed against their bodies. They combed the turquoise ocean until they all agreed that the sheltered cove at Kybsilla Rock was the perfect spot for abalone hunting. On their way there, they made use of the fishing pole that was on board and caught a few lingcod. Their impromptu boat ride was off to a great start. 10 miles from Fort Bragg, they dropped their anchor. The trio had been at this cove several times before and knew it like the palm of their hands. So, before they could set foot in the cool, alluring waters, they quickly scanned the ocean for sharks or sea lions that the great white sharks were fond of trailing. Once the coast was clear, Randall wasted no time and jumped into the waters. The water was so refreshing. His heart was full. A few minutes later, Cliff joined him. Since abalones could only be caught through free diving in the 15-foot deep waters, all they had on was a wetsuit and mask. While Randy, as they were fond of calling him, was slowly drifting farther away from the boat, Cliff remained close by because he was having trouble with his equipment. For some reason, his mask kept fogging up. Bartley chose to stay behind and keep an eye out for any danger. While on the deck of the boat, he decided to keep himself busy. He took out his fishing rod, hooked the bait, and cast it into the water. Within no time, Bartley had landed a black rock cod before the rest could catch their first abalone. Randy was now 3 feet away from Cliff, who was trying to catch up, but was still struggling with his mask. Afloat, they chatted away and made fun as their heads were bobbing up and down with every breath that the sea took. Randy was yearning to get started with the adventure and couldn't wait a minute longer for Cliff to finish fiddling with his equipment. And so he decided to dive deeper. Not wanting to miss out on the fun, Cliff hurriedly cleaned his foggy mask off and dipped his head into the water to suction his mask onto his head. As his face broke the surface of the water, the unexpected happened. He could feel the pressure of something big passing near him. He stuck his head out of the water and looked around, hoping to see the submarine or speedboat that had just gone past him. In a horrific turn of events, Cliff's eyes were met with a large dorsal fin sticking out of the water. All he knew and needed to know was that the fish was big enough to kill. Before his screams of terror could reach Randall and warn him of the impending danger, the blue ocean suddenly turned crimson. Out of nowhere, the 18-foot great white shark grabbed Randall by his throat and tore his head off, killing him instantly. Copious amounts of blood were seen gushing to the water's surface before both the shark and Randy disappeared
Damn! Wasn't ready. I wasn't ready.
into the murkiness, killing him instantly. Grabbed Randy,
Jesus.
turned crimson. Out of nowhere, the 18-foot great white shark grabbed Randall by his throat and tore his head off, killing him instantly.
Oh, he did that shark to the shake thing. The second he did that, yep.
Copious amounts of blood were seen gushing to the water's surface before both the shark and Randy disappeared into the murkiness of the water. For a moment, Cliff thought that he was right in the middle of a horror movie, but the now strong waves quickly slapped him back to his senses. Cliff, who had spent a good amount of his life on this coast, had heard of many previous shark attacks, but none was fatal. And for a shark attack as fatal as Randy's to happen right before his eyes, it was unbelievable. He could not shake the feeling that a few seconds ago, that could have been him. However, he was still not yet safe from the monstrous creature. He immediately dropped his weight belt and gathered all the energy left in him and frantically made a swim for the boat. He could not tell if the shark was onto him. With his heart about to burst from his chest, he pushed himself beyond his limits, praying and hoping that his body would propel him faster than the water-dwelling monster. Luckily, Bartley was there to yank him out of the water. Bartley, who had heard Cliff screaming at the top of his lungs, looked up only to see a pool of blood spreading on the water's surface. It was at this moment that he knew that there would be no more abalone hunting for Randall. They took a moment and looked around one more time, but they could neither see the shark nor their beloved friend. The blood, too, was gone. Cliff was still trembling and could barely catch his breath. Bartley quickly reached for his radio at the same time, trying to steer the boat, and made a mayday call for help. The duo began their agonizing ride back to the sandy shore. Within the nick of time, helicopters were hovering over the cave at Kybsilla Rocks, looking for Randall's body. Sadly, their efforts were fruitless. As dusk came, the team dispersed. Bartley began his drive back home, but first, he needed to make another call. He called Randy's mom and broke the news to her. The following day, in a haunting twist, while recounting their interaction with Randall, Cliff remembered that during one of their usual bunters, Randy had mentioned that a shark might get him in the future. Little did he know that the premonition would come true, and in the most horrific way possible, and that his friends would be left watching in horror. The only comfort that Randall's loved ones got was that earlier that day, a Coast Guard had recovered Randall's lifeless, headless body. Were it not for the wetsuit that had his name on it, it would have taken longer to identify him. But the horror was far from over. On September 8th, 3 weeks after the horrific incident, a beachcomber walking on 10 Mile Beach, north of Fort Bragg, found a head. Upon further investigations,
Found a head.
it was identified by the Mendocino County authorities as belonging to Randall. Fatal shark
I'm sorry, Randall.
attacks in this area were rare, and when consulted about the reasons for this one, experts strongly believe that the shark may have mistaken Randy for a seal.
They do, great whites. I'm telling you, great whites have a poor depth. Okay, they don't have a poor depth, sense, but when they say, their vision is not the greatest, but they can all they go by is movement. So if we look like a seal or act like one, in the water, their great whites are just gonna fucking go after it. They're just gonna see it and just assume it's a seal and then hit it. And that's how we get here in this predicament.
Others suspect
Like, if you're around where, like, known seals are and stuff, I mean, uh, you're gonna get hit by a great white. It's, if not, if you don't get love tapped by a great white, then there's gonna be one, you're gonna see one.
Suspected that Bartley's decision to start fishing could have attracted the shark to the area.
Yeah, that could have been it too. The guy that started fishing probably did it. Actually, I know that's why. If there was no seals around and then him fishing, that was the reason why. On unannounced. I like obviously this guy didn't want this to happen, obviously. So yeah.
Bartley's decision to start fishing could have attracted the shark to the area. At the time of his death, Randall was a director of the Recreation Fishing Alliance.
Jugga Willie and Mr. Bong. Nice for y'all to stop by.
And had dedicated
Good to see you.
himself to being a voice for the divers and fishermen near and far. His family and friends came together to spread his ashes in Maverick's Surf near Half Moon Bay. He spent his better days in the ocean and wanted to rest near it. Many described him as a generous man whose absence would be greatly felt by his community. Randy's colleagues termed him irreplaceable, and his death remains to be a chilly reminder of the unforeseen dangers that are lurking in the alluring water.
God damn, look at look, my God, look at the height. That's like 10 feet out of water. This great white is like fucking flying out of. Good God. They're phenomenal animals. Oh my God. They're awesome. Unfortunately, they they come around us a lot too more often, but they're fascinating animals. Just saying. What was the other? Yeah, we're about to go. Out of all these stories, I am about to take us to a very dark place. We're about to go back to wolves again. Except these wolves, this one wolf, I'm just going to let the story. I haven't heard the story yet. I just see the title. I just picked it because of the title. It's called This Lone Wolf Ripped Apart 3 Children.
The wolf.
Like I said, wolves. Gorgeous. Fantastic predators. Yeah. Does have to be mindful. I mean, I sound like a fucking dickhead, but you have to be mindful of these predators. I don't know where, like people and animals is like I've heard it from Joe Rogan's podcast and like some other ones. It's like people and animals have like this weird, like people and animals in general, like wild animals. Like people think like are weird with wild animals. Like they have like this like people think like they have like a trust treaty, like I don't know, some type of code with all these like wild animals and shit. And like this is like people don't want to hear this stuff. Like the stuff that I'm throwing out there. This is what happens. Like on a regular basis. Not on a regular basis, but like this is what happens a lot of the times when you run into wild animals and don't treat them as such, or Like, like sharks, that's like that's water. Like, I'm talking about land. Water, that's a whole different ball game too. But like on land, like like these predators on land, it's like you have to respect them. Like, know the area that you're in. It's
Is
oh.
a fierce predator that's
You just have to understand the environment you're going in, and just have to respect that animal that's in front of you. Just don't be a fucking idiot. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But I have to say it. You're a fucking idiot if you keep like I've saw it so many times up in Montana and Glacier, and it really pissed me off when I see a lot of people with their cameras out, like with their phones out, running up to these fucking grizzly bears. And like I'm telling them, like, I it's like I look like a crazy person, but I'm just saying I'm trying to save your fucking life on top of that. But it's I don't know.
strikes fear into the hearts of both its prey and those who encounter it. Their powerful jaws, sharp teeth, and fearless aggression make them a formidable opponent for any prey that crosses their path. But what happens when humans find themselves in the crosshairs of these deadly creatures? Hit that like button and subscribe right now. In this episode, we tell the terrifying true story of one of the worst wolf attacks ever recorded. A group of young boys who find themselves fighting for their lives after being brutally mauled by a lone wolf. Welcome to Final Affliction. The Tsuninsky district can be found in southwest Russia in the Republic of Dagestan, right on the border of Georgia. It is a small
Dude, those Dagestanians, telling you, UFC takeover.
district, only 1,300 square kilometers.
Habib is gonna fucking take over. His fucking Dagestanians are gonna take over UFC. Unless John Jones has to say of that.
In area, with a population of around 20,000 people. Although there may not be many people here, the sense of community is always strong in smaller towns, and their connection to the rugged landscape around them is very strong. With tall, snow-capped mountains and lush green fields, the diversity of wildlife found here is impressive, but sometimes the animals of the forest will venture out into the world of humans, and when this happens, something will always go wrong. On July 28, 2022, 3 young boys decided to enter the forest near to their house together. Aged between 7 and 9, the children were friends at school and loved to go on adventures together, climbing rocks and swimming in the nearby river on the forest's edge. As they were free from the confines of school for the summer, and the weather was particularly nice, they decided to head to the river together for a day of swimming. Despite their age, they knew the area pretty well and easily traveled across the countryside to get to their favorite swimming spot. Their mothers had always warned them of what might lurk inside the forest, telling them the tales of little boys being taken into the woods to be eaten by hungry wolves. The boys were always on the lookout, just in case they were to become another story. After checking their surroundings, they decided that they were alone and jumped into the water. They spent the next few hours swimming up and down the backwaters of the river, splashing and racing each other in their very own natural water park. As the day continued, the boys began to get a little tired and sat on the edge of the river, dipping their toes in the water to cool off. They chatted together about school starting and their families, telling jokes to each other that they heard from the adults. All of a sudden, they were interrupted by a rustling sound behind them. It was very quiet, and they had no idea how long it may have been happening, for as the rush of the water overpowered most of the sounds around them. Thinking about the stories of their mothers, they began to look around for any wild animals that may be watching them from the forest, but they couldn't spot anything. Despite not seeing anything through the bushes, they still felt uneasy and decided it would be best to go home, just to be safe. Suddenly, one of the boys shouted out as he spotted the yellow eyes of a wolf emerging from the darkness. The boys screamed in terror as a 150-pound gray wolf jumped from the bushes, snarling at them as it decided its next move. These children had been taught what to do when faced with a wolf. They knew to make themselves big and back away, never turning your back on the animal. Unfortunately, they were young and frightened. Everything that they knew was forgotten in the fear of the moment, replaced with the feeling that they needed to escape the area immediately. They turned and began to sprint away, which only fueled the wolf into a chase, as it now viewed them as prey and knew it would be able to take them down with ease. Within seconds, the fierce wolf bit down on the youngest boy's leg and pulled him to the ground. It gripped him with sharp teeth, digging into his tiny leg, and tore a section from his body. The boy screamed out in pain as blood began to flow from his thigh. The boy struggled to crawl away, but the wolf had other plans as it pounced onto his back and dug its teeth into his neck. Panicking, the boy began to grab the animal's snout and push it away from him, but the predator easily overpowered him. Suddenly, the boy felt the animal flinch as it let out a loud yelp in pain. With his face in the dirt, he tried to look around to see what was happening, and that's when he saw his friend, the eldest of the group, throwing rocks at the animal biting down on his neck. He felt its grip loosen, and he began to pull himself from under the wolf as it turned to face the 9-year-old boy instead. Although he was severely injured from the attack and completely covered in his own blood, he was aware enough to know his friend had just saved his life. However, the wolf wasn't finished, and now he was mad. The wolf pounced from one boy to the other, knocking over the 9-year-old with little resistance. The boy screamed out, but it was short-lived, as the animal grabbed him by the throat to silence him. As the youngest boy watched the wolf mauling his friend, he noticed that his other friend was nowhere to be seen. He knew this meant that he must have escaped and would soon bring help to save them both. As the wolf gripped on his friend's neck, the youngest boy watched in terror as his friend's struggles slowly came to an end. His lifeless body was now face down in the dirt as the wolf continued to maul him, knowing that it would soon start eating him. The massive animal lifted up his friend by his neck, dragging its limp body beneath him as it disappeared into the forest. As the young boy watched his friend get taken away, he slowly lost consciousness and fell back into the blood-soaked dirt. Meanwhile, the boy who had escaped the deadly attack was sprinting through the forest as fast as he could. He could hear his friends screaming in the distance, and although he wished he could help them, the fear of becoming the next victim only fueled him to run faster. After a few minutes, he made it back to his house and crashed through the door to the surprise of his parents. He quickly explained what he had seen and how his friends were in grave danger as they listened in dismay. They immediately phoned for the emergency services, and soon police and paramedics were dispatched to the wooded area. As they arrived, the woods were quiet, and they were initially unable to find the exact location of the attack. After hours of combing through the forest, they finally made the horrifying discovery. The youngest boy was face down, unconscious, with a large gaping hole in the side of his neck, which was slowly oozing blood into the ground around him. He was very pale and his breathing was shaking. They knew they didn't have long to save this boy. As they removed the boy from the scene, they realized there was no sign of the 9-year-old and knew that they needed to widen their search if they had any chance of finding him. The men ventured further into the forest, spreading out along all the edges. Locals from the town joined in on the search after hearing of the attack, and eventually the entire town came together to find the lost child. It took some time before they finally came across the boy on the far edge of the forest. He had been dragged for many miles, and his tiny body was destroyed, ripped apart by the animal, who consumed him as a meal. They couldn't see any sign of the wolf nearby, but needed to find him fast. They feared that after tasting human flesh, the wolf would begin looking for more. The last thing they wanted was for more children to be attacked and eaten by this ferocious predator. They gathered the remains of the oldest boy and delivered him to his grieving parents, distraught that they had just lost their only son in such a vicious attack. While the family in town were grieving the death of the boy, the youngest boy from the attack was transferred to a local hospital attempting to save his life. Initially, he was in a small hospital, but it was determined that his injuries required a more modern treatment plan and was transferred to Makhachkala, the capital of the region. It was there he was saved. His wounds were cleaned and repaired, stabilizing his condition. He was in intensive care for months, and after numerous operations, he was finally able to return home to his grateful parents. In addition, he was in intensive care for months, and after numerous operations, he was finally able to return home to his grateful parents. Thankfully, the boy survived, but he will never be able to forget the day he saw his friend getting brutally mauled in front of his eyes, struggling to resist as he met his unfortunate final affliction.
Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it on that note. I have adult shit to do tomorrow morning. I have to work early in the morning, so that was it for me, guys. Like I said, I'm trying to figure out like days to do these type of streams. I like it. I love it. I want some more of it. Tim McGraw. Yeah, I just wanted to do some stuff other than Lorne, because sometimes it just gets boring for me. So, yeah, I'm gonna try to like do these types of streams, but I want to do like certain days too, like split them up between Lorne and these types of streams. So, I'll figure it out. I'm thinking like Fridays are gonna be pretty good for doing that. And then I don't know. I'll let you guys know. So yeah. Thank you guys. For coming out again. I love you guys. Thank you guys. Hit that like, subscribe, bell, all the good stuff. I have my Discord in the description too, so join that as well. I also have my email in there, so you can email me. I'm going to do better. I am going to try to do better in checking that, but my email's in there, so email me like Lorne stuff or whatever. And like this type of stuff, if you want to hear like paranormal, like ghost stuff, cryptid, like Bigfoot, anything along type, anything, literally, email me it, and then I'll try to fit it into the stream or whatever. Anyways, I had fun, guys. I love this type of stuff. As my sick, demented side comes out of me. Not really, but I mean, I like this type of stuff. Anyways, yeah, had fun hanging out with you guys, as always. Yeah, we're on our way to 1,000, so hit that subscribe, y'all. Love you guys. I'll be back tomorrow for sure. But we'll be doing Lorne content tomorrow, so we'll be back at it tomorrow. So love you guys. I'll be back at it. in the afternoon actually tomorrow. So keep it posted. So love you guys. See you guys tomorrow. Majestic is out. Have a good night, y'all. Love you guys. Bye.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick. All the boys stare, can't help it, it's a habit. Clothes that she wears, short skirt and a jacket. I just wanna get her all alone on a mattress. I just wanna have it, I just gotta have it. Rumors all around say her body is fantastic. All natural, not a piece of fur is plastic. Head to her toes, yeah, they say that she's a latch. Yeah, the whispers all around say she has a reputation. Don't believe it till I see it, so I want a demonstration. And I've always learned it better with a hands-on education. So I need a private session, if you get what I am saying. And they say that she's not easy, no, she's really complicated. But that only makes it better, and it's got me so fixated. And I'm not the type to wait around, I've never hesitated. But she's got me captivated, so the game, I'm gonna play it, yeah. She got a body like a coke thing. She likes to keep the party going. These rumors got me feeling lonely. I want that body, baby, show me. She's got a body like a coke thing. She likes to keep the party going. These rumors got me feeling lonely. I want that body, baby, show me. I heard you look good when you're undressed. I heard you like to get away. I heard you like to stay out late. I heard you had a couple boyfriends. I heard they didn't treat you right. I heard you're hated by your girlfriends, 'cause all the guys want you tonight. Yeah, they say she's too hot, they say she's too cold. Where she came from, nobody really knows. They say she looks young, but say she acts old. From everything I've heard, she gets out of control. And all the boys say she was sent from the heavens, but I'm not too sure that this girl is a blessing. She's got the devil's eyes, and they'll cut you like a weapon. She's stuck in